The insulin pump's alarm cut through the midnight silence like a scalpel, 3 shrill beeps that meant Emily Lawson had maybe 30 minutes before her body started eating itself from the inside out. Rebecca's eyes snapped open in the darkness of the guest bedroom, that primal mother radar already calculating before her brain fully engaged. She rolled off the twin mattress Patricia had grudgingly provided 2 months ago when the eviction notice came, her bare feet hitting cold hardwood. The pump screen glowed angry red in Emily's small fist. Low reservoir. 3 units remaining. Emily stirred, 8 years old and small for her age, her breathing already taking on that shallow quality that made Rebecca's stomach clench. The glucose monitor on the nightstand blinked 302 milligrams per deciliter, dangerously high. The pump had been rationing insulin for hours while they slept, trying to stretch the last few units. Rebecca grabbed the monitor, thumb already moving to test strip drawer. Empty. She'd used the last one at dinner, watching that number climb from 180 to 240, while Emily picked at the spaghetti Patricia's boyfriend Richard had deemed acceptable for them to eat. The spare insulin cartridges lived in the kitchen refrigerator, tucked behind the organic kale Richard juiced every morning in the Vitamix he'd bought with Patricia's retirement savings. The hallway stretched long and dark floorboards, creaking under Rebecca's weight, despite her efforts at silence. She'd learned the geography of this house through 2 months of walking on eggshells, which boards groaned, which doors stuck, where Richard kept his expensive scotch and his cheaper anger. The kitchen light blazed suddenly as she rounded the corner, fluorescent and accusing. Patricia stood at the counter in her bathrobe, hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea, the steam rising like guilt. She'd lost weight? Rebecca noticed it every day now, the way her mother's collarbone jutted sharp beneath papery skin, the hollows under her eyes deepening. 52 years old and shrinking into something brittle. The refrigerator door opened with a soft, mechanical sigh. Rebecca's hand found the vegetable crisper where she'd hidden 3 precious insulin cartridges behind the organic carrots Richard never ate. Her fingers closed on empty plastic. Gone. She checked again, pushing aside kale, pushing aside bell peppers, her pulse hammering against her ribs in a rhythm that matched Emily's labored breathing 2 rooms away. Patricia's reflection wavered in the refrigerator's stainless steel surface, distorted and small. Rebecca turned slowly. "Where's Emily's insulin?" Patricia's hands trembled against the mug, tea sloshing. "Richard threw them out this morning. He said," her voice caught, "he said you're not paying rent. You don't get to use our refrigerator." The words landed like physical blows. Rebecca's vision tunneled the kitchen, reducing to a single point of furious clarity, her mother's downturned eyes, the purple bruise peeking from beneath the robe's collar, the way Patricia held herself like something already broken. "Mom, Emily will go into DKA without insulin now. Diabetic ketoacidosis. She could die." "I know," barely a whisper. "I tried to explain, but he gets so angry when I question." Footsteps on the stairs, heavy and deliberate. Richard Thornton appeared in the doorway wearing pajama pants and an $800 cashmere sweater, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled even at midnight. Everything about him screamed control, the way he filled space, the calculated pause before speaking, the smile that never reached his eyes. "Rebecca, I thought I heard scurrying." His gaze slid to Patricia. "Still awake, darling. You know, Dr. Morrison said you need rest for your condition." Patricia shrank actually, physically diminished, her shoulders curling inward. Rebecca had watched this transformation over 18 months, her sharp-tongued mother reduced to this apologetic ghost who couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Rebecca kept her voice level, every word measured. "Emily needs insulin. Where did you put the cartridges?" "I disposed of medical waste that was cluttering my refrigerator." Richard crossed to the kitchen island, trailing fingers along the marble countertop Patricia had chosen during the renovation before Richard moved in, before the money started disappearing into his investments, before everything turned to ash. "Your freeloading ends tonight. That child's medical crisis is not my problem. You should have thought about that before stealing from me." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Rebecca's hands curled into fists at her sides. "I didn't steal anything." Richard reached into his pocket, produced a silver locket on a delicate chain. It caught the fluorescent light, spinning slowly, hypnotic. Rebecca's breath stopped. She'd worn that locket every day since she was 16, hidden under her shirts close to her heart. The only thing Kenneth had left her. "This belonged to your grandfather." Richard's voice dripped false reasonableness, the tone he probably used with clients before destroying their lives. "He left it to me in a verbal agreement before his unfortunate stroke. You took it from my safe 2 days ago. That's theft, Rebecca. I could call the police." "That's a lie." The words exploded out. "Grandpa Kenneth gave it to me when I was 16. I've had it for 11 years. "Prove it." Richard smiled, then slow and satisfied. "Because I have documentation showing Kenneth and I discussed his estate extensively before his death. A codicil to his will naming me as beneficiary of certain personal effects, witnessed and notarized." Forged. It had to be forged. Kenneth hated Richard, called him a parasite at the one family dinner they'd shared before Richard started making excuses about why he couldn't attend Lawson gatherings. But proving forgery required lawyers, required money. Rebecca didn't have, required time Emily didn't have. The insulin pump's alarm shrieked again from the guest bedroom. Emily's small voice, frightened and thick. "Mama, I don't feel good." Rebecca moved toward the hallway. Richard's hand shot out, gripped her wrist hard enough to bruise. "I'm calling the police unless you leave. Now, both of you, and you can take your theft charges with you." Patricia made a small sound, almost a whimper. "Richard, please, just let her get Emily's medicine from the pharmacy first. I have money." His other hand cracked across Patricia's face before Rebecca could process the movement. The sound echoed in the pristine kitchen, sharp and final. Patricia's tea mug shattered on the floor, chamomile spreading like blood. Rebecca lunged. Richard shoved her backward into the refrigerator, its contents rattling. His face was inches from hers, breath hot and sour. "You move again, I call 911 and report a violent intruder attacking me in my own home." How do you think that plays for a single mother with a diabetic child? His grip tightened. "Now get your shit and get out of my house." Emily appeared in the doorway, ghost pale and swaying her stuffed rabbit. Mr. Hops clutched against her chest. The glucose monitor in Rebecca's pocket would read higher now, probably 340, maybe 350. Too high. Vomiting would start soon, the first stage of ketoacidosis. Then the real danger, organ failure, coma, death. Rebecca met her daughter's eyes and saw trust there, absolute and terrifying. 8 years old, and already She'd learned to believe her mother could fix anything. Rebecca had no idea how to fix this. She scooped Emily into her arms, the child's body burning with fever heat from the glucose overload. Patricia tried to slip $200 bills into Rebecca's pocket. Richard snatched them back, his face a mask of cold fury. You want to enable her victim mentality? Fine, but not with my money. He grabbed Patricia's wrist, the same wrist already purple with old bruises. She winced, but didn't cry out. Rebecca carried Emily toward the guest room, her mind racing through impossible calculations. 2 trash bags of clothes, $63 in her checking account. No car sold 3 months ago to pay Emily's endocrinologist bill. Nearest 24-hour pharmacy, 4 miles east on Division Street. Insulin vial without insurance, $380. She could walk there in 90 minutes carrying Emily. But Emily needed insulin now, not in 90 minutes. The ER was closer 2 miles south. They'd treat her, stabilize her blood sugar, and then call Child Protective Services because what kind of mother lets her diabetic daughter reach DKA CPS would take Emily into emergency foster care pending investigation. Rebecca had seen it happen to another mother at the Diabetes Support Group, a woman whose crime was being poor in America. The guest bedroom was sparse twin bed, 2 trash bags Rebecca used as dressers, the glucose monitor and insulin pump supplies arranged on the nightstand with military precision. Emily's school backpack hung on the door hook containing her math homework and the permission slip for the field trip Rebecca couldn't afford to send her on. Rebecca packed with mechanical efficiency, her hands moving while her brain screamed. Clothes, Emily's medical supplies, the emergency glucagon kit that only worked for low blood sugar, not high, the last glucose test strips, even though they were useless without insulin to correct the numbers. Emily sat on the bed watching, too sick to help, her breathing shallow and rapid. The insulin pump beeped its final warning, 0 units remaining. Reservoir empty. Rebecca's hands stilled on a faded photograph tucked in her wallet. Kenneth at his retirement party, sharp-eyed and smiling, one arm around teenage Rebecca. The year before he'd given her the locket. The year before everything started falling apart. His voice echoed in her memory, that last conversation they'd had before the stroke, that wasn't really a stroke. If you're ever in real trouble, little architect, remember what I taught you. The answer is always in the blueprint. The locket. Richard had put it in his pocket after the confrontation, but Rebecca had seen where he kept his valuables, the safe in his home office behind the Rothko print he'd bought to impress Patricia's book club friends. The combination was Patricia's birthday because Richard was predictable in his arrogance. She couldn't leave without it. Whatever Kenneth had hidden in that locket, it was worth more than sentiment, worth more than Richard's threats, worth risking everything. The house had gone quiet, only the soft murmur of voices from the master bedroom. Richard issuing commands, Patricia acquiescing in that hollow voice that used to be full of fire. Rebecca settled Emily on the bed, pressed a kiss to her burning forehead. Close your eyes, baby. Rest for 2 minutes. Then we're leaving. Emily's hand found hers, small and trusting. Are we going somewhere safe? The question hit like a knife between ribs. Rebecca had no answer that wasn't a lie. I'm making us safe. That's a promise. Richard's office smelled of leather and expensive cologne, the scent of a man who'd never worried where his next insulin vial would come from. The Rothko hung perfectly level on the west wall, all bleeding oranges and reds that probably cost more than Rebecca earned in a year when she'd had her paralegal job. Before the law firm downsized, before Thomas died, before everything became a long slide into this moment, the safe opened with a whisper, quiet click. Oh, 523, Patricia's birthday, May 23rd. Inside, cash in neat rubber-banded stacks, property deeds, a Glock 19 Rebecca didn't touch, and there nested in velvet Kenneth's locket. She grabbed it, the silver warm from being recently handled. The chain slid through her fingers like water pooling in her palm. The weight of it felt like possibility, like Kenneth reaching across death to save them. Footsteps in the hallway, heavy, male, coming closer. Rebecca pocketed the locket closed. The safe was halfway to the door when Richard filled the frame. His eyes went to the Rothko, to her empty hands, back to her face. Understanding dawned, slow and terrible. You really are a thief. It's mine. Kenneth gave it to me. Prove it. He moved into the room, casual and predatory. Because I'm calling the police right now. Breaking and entering theft assault. Yes, I'll mention how you attacked Patricia earlier, how unstable you've been since Thomas's death, how you're clearly an unfit mother. The threat crystallized into sharp relief. Richard could do it, would do it. One call and Emily disappeared into the system while Rebecca fought charges she couldn't afford to defend against. Even if she won, eventually, Emily would be gone, placed with strangers, maybe separated from her pump and monitor, maybe dead from a well-meaning foster parent who didn't understand insulin to carb ratios. Rebecca's hand closed around the locket in her pocket. Let me take Emily to the pharmacy. Give us 2 hours head start. You never see us again. Richard laughed, genuine amusement. No, I think I'll watch you squirm a little longer. It's what Patricia needs to see how her precious daughter is just another user, just another leech draining resources. Maybe then she'll finally understand her place in this household. The master bedroom door opened. Patricia emerged, moving like someone recently beaten, her face already swelling on the left side. She clutched the cordless phone, her hands shaking so badly the plastic rattled. I called them, she whispered. The police. I told them Richard hit me. They're coming. Richard's face went through a rapid evolution, shock rage, then something colder and more calculated. You stupid! I'm done. Patricia's voice gained strength, the first real force Rebecca had heard from her in 18 months. I recorded your confession about the locket, about calling CPS. It's uploading to my email right now. If anything happens to Rebecca or Emily, it goes to every lawyer in Portland. Bluff. Had to be a bluff. Patricia barely knew how to use email, let alone record conversations, but Richard didn't know that. His eyes darted to the office computer, to his phone, calculating odds and exposure. You're going to regret this, Patricia. Everything you think you own, it's in my name now. The house, the accounts, your retirement. You'll have nothing. Then I'll have nothing. Patricia met Rebecca's eyes across the hallway, and something passed between them, recognition, maybe, or forgiveness. But my daughter and granddaughter will be alive. That's enough. Sirens in the distance, growing closer. Richard grabbed his car keys from the office desk, his movements sharp with barely controlled violence. This isn't over. He shouldered past Patricia hard enough to send her stumbling, took the stairs 2 at a time. The front door slammed, engine roar, tires squealing. Rebecca caught Patricia before she fell, her mother's body light as a bird bone sharp through the bathrobe. Patricia was crying silent tears, tracking down bruised cheeks. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I let him. Later, Rebecca's voice came out harder than intended. We need to go before the police get here. They'll have questions I can't answer. CPS will get involved anyway. Patricia pressed something into Rebecca's hand, a roll of bills, rubber-banded. Emergency money, 500. It's all I could hide from him. Mom, take it. Get Emily to safety. And Rebecca. Patricia's fingers closed over the locket through Rebecca's pocket. Your grandfather told me once that locket would save your life someday. I didn't believe him. I should have believed him about a lot of things. Emily called from the guest room, her voice weak. Mama, no time. The sirens were close now, maybe 2 blocks away. Rebecca grabbed the trash bags, hoisted Emily into her arms, despite the child being too heavy for comfortable carrying anymore, and went out the back doors into December's freezing rain. Behind her, Patricia stood in the doorway, backlit by kitchen fluorescents, small and alone, and finally, impossibly free. The rain in Portland didn't just fall, it assaulted, came at you sideways, with wind-driven malice, soaked through denim and cotton in seconds, and found every gap in cheap outerwear. Rebecca's jacket was from Goodwill, bought when she still thought things would get better, before she understood that poverty was quicksand that pulled harder the more you struggled. Emily shivered against her chest. The insulin pump's empty warning silenced now, but its absence somehow louder. The glucose monitor in Rebecca's pocket would show catastrophic numbers if she checked. She didn't check. What was the point when she had no insulin to give? Division Street stretched ahead, through sheets of rain storefronts, dark except for the 24-hour plaid pantry and the sketchy motel with hourly rates. Rebecca's arms burned from Emily's weight. Her boots, also Goodwill soles separating from uppers, let in water with each step. She'd walked maybe half a mile, 3.5 to go. Emily's breathing had changed, taking on a fruity smell that meant ketones building in her blood. Her body metabolizing fat for fuel because no insulin meant glucose stayed trapped in her bloodstream, useless and toxic. Rebecca had researched this, knew the progression: nausea, vomiting, confusion, unconsciousness, coma, death. Hours, maybe less. The plaid pantry parking lot offered minimal shelter under the overhang. Rebecca set Emily down carefully on the concrete, the child's eyes glassy and unfocused. A semi-truck idled at the diesel pumps, its air brakes hissing. The driver climbed down from the cab, a woman, maybe 50s, weathered face, and kind eyes, wearing a Seahawks jacket and muddy boots. She spotted them immediately, her gaze taking in Emily's pallor, Rebecca's desperation, the trash bags serving as luggage. You need help. The question landed like grace, like permission to stop pretending everything was fine. Rebecca's throat closed. She managed to nod. The truck driver crossed the parking lot with ground-eating strides. Up close, Rebecca could see crow's feet etched deep around her eyes, hands calloused from years gripping steering wheels. Her name tag read, Carol Weber. What's wrong with your daughter? Diabetes, type 1. She's out of insulin. I have $63. The pharmacy won't sell me a vial for that. The words came out flat, factual, beyond shame now. Carol knelt in front of Emily, checked her pulse with practiced efficiency. She's tachycardic. How long since her last dose? 6 hours. The pump ran dry. Jesus! Carol stood, made a decision, visible in the set of her shoulders. My sister has a vet practice in Gresham, 20 minutes from here. She keeps veterinary insulin on hand. Humulin, same stuff humans use. $40 a vial. Hope surged so painful it felt like drowning. "You do that! Get in the truck!" The cab interior smelled like coffee and diesel CB radio crackling with trucker chatter. Carol settled Emily in the sleeper berth, wrapped her in a wool blanket that probably violated every health code but was warm and soft. She handed Rebecca a glucose tablet from the glove compartment. "Give her this. It'll spike her blood sugar higher short term, but might keep her conscious until we get the insulin." Emily took the tablet obediently, her small jaw working mechanically. Her eyes found Rebecca's full of questions she was too sick to voice. Rebecca smoothed her daughter's hair back from her damp forehead, felt the heat radiating from skin stretched too tight over fragile bones. The truck rumbled to life, engine growling like something alive. Carol navigated out of the parking lot with the ease of someone who'd driven 1,000,000 miles, her hand steady on the wheel. The windshield wipers beat a rhythm against the downpour. "You running from someone?" Carol's eyes stayed on the road tone, carefully neutral. "My mother's boyfriend. He kicked us out." Partial truth. Easier than explaining everything. Richard's threats, Kenneth's secrets, the locket burning a hole in Rebecca's pocket. "Boyfriend hit you?" "Hit my mother. Destroyed my daughter's insulin and because I wouldn't let him steal something that belonged to my grandfather." Carol's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. "Men like that are a disease. I know. I married one once. Took me 15 years and a broken arm to leave." She glanced at Rebecca, expression fierce. "You got somewhere safe to go after we get your girl stabilized." Rebecca's mind went to the locket, to Kenneth's voice in her memory. The answer is always in the blueprint. She'd never opened it, never looked closely at the engraving. It was just a keepsake, a reminder of the grandfather who'd believed she could build anything if she planned it right. Maybe it was time to look. The veterinary clinic was dark closed for the night, but Carol had keys. "My sister Angela trusts me with the emergency supplies. Lost a horse to insulin shock once because the owner couldn't get medication fast enough. She swore never again." Inside smelled like antiseptic and animal fear. Carol moved through the space with confidence, knowing which cabinets held which supplies. She emerged with a vial of Humulin insulin, a pack of syringes, alcohol wipes. "You know how to dose her." Rebecca did. She'd been calculating insulin into carb ratios for 3 years, since Emily's diagnosis at age 5, when her pancreas just stopped working for reasons no doctor could explain. Juvenile diabetes, they called it, like the name made it less cruel that a kindergartner had to stab herself with needles 6 times a day to stay alive. She drew up 2 units, injected it into Emily's arm. The child barely flinched, so used to this invasion, it was just another Tuesday. Except it was Thursday, and they were homeless, and Rebecca had no plan beyond the next 5 minutes. The insulin would take 20 to 30 minutes to start working. They waited in the clinic's exam room, Emily curled on the metal table, Rebecca perched on a stool, counting her daughter's breaths. Carol made coffee in the break room, brought it back in styrofoam cups that warmed Rebecca's frozen hands. "That vial will last your girl maybe 10 days if you're careful," Carol said. "Then what?" "I don't know." The honesty felt like failure. "I had a job. Paralegal at a firm downtown. They downsized, let me go. I've been looking for work, but Emily needs someone who can manage her diabetes, and most employers aren't interested in single mothers who need to leave for medical emergencies." Carol studied her over the rim of her coffee cup. "What about family?" "My mother is being poisoned by her boyfriend. My father died when I was 12. My husband Emily's father died 4 years ago in a car accident that maybe wasn't an accident." The words spilled out too much information, but Carol's face showed no judgment, only that same fierce protectiveness she'd displayed in the parking lot. "And your grandfather, the one who owned whatever that boyfriend tried to steal." Rebecca's hand moved to her pocket, felt the locket's outline. "Dead. 2 years. Everyone said it was a stroke. I'm starting to think they were wrong." She pulled out the locket, let it dangle from its chain. Silver antique, surprisingly heavy for its size. The engraving on the front showed an architect's compass and Square Kenneth's profession before he retired, or what she'd thought was his profession. Now she wondered what else she'd gotten wrong. Carol leaned forward, interested. "That's beautiful. Family heirloom. Kenneth gave it to me when I was 16. Said it was insurance, that if anything happened to him, I should follow the map." Rebecca turned it over. The back was smooth, except for tiny numbers etched almost invisibly along the edge: 47.6 degrees north, 122.3 degrees west, /0816. Coordinates, latitude and longitude, and a 4-digit code. Carol pulled out her phone, typed the coordinates into Google Maps. Olympic National Forest, middle of nowhere, about 3 hours northwest of here. What's at those coordinates? I have no idea. Rebecca's heart hammered. Kenneth had planned this, prepared for exactly this scenario. Rebecca alone, desperate, needing help. He'd known something would happen, known Richard or someone like him would come, known she'd need more than sentiment. Only one way to find out. Carol drained her coffee, stood with decision. My route takes me north toward Seattle anyway. I can drop you at those coordinates, see what your grandfather left you. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Carol's expression went distant, remembering. I had a daughter once. Lost her to CPS when I was homeless. Couldn't afford to feed her, couldn't keep her safe. System placed her with a family in California. I haven't seen her in 15 years. Maybe this is God giving me a chance to help someone else's kid. Emily stirred on the exam table, her color already better, breathing easier as the insulin pulled glucose from her bloodstream into cells that could actually use it. Her eyes opened, found Rebecca. "Mama, where are we?" "Safe, baby. Miss Carol is helping us." Rebecca checked the glucose monitor, 240 milligrams per deciliter. Still high, but dropping. Another hour and Emily would be stable enough to travel. Emily's gaze drifted to Carol. "Are you a doctor?" "Truck driver, but I know a little bit about everything, including how to keep little girls safe." Carol smiled, the expression transforming her weathered face into something warm. "You ever ridden in a big rig?" Emily shook her head, suddenly interested despite the circumstances. "Well, you're about to get the full experience. Sleeper berth, CB radio, the works. We're going on a treasure hunt to find what your great-grandfather left for your mama." The drive north took them through darkness and rain, headlights cutting tunnels through the downpour. Emily slept in the sleeper berth, her breathing steady now, blood sugar normalized. Carol handled the 18-wheeler with casual expertise, navigating Interstate 5 like she owned it. Rebecca sat in the passenger seat, watching Oregon blur past strip malls and car dealerships, giving way to forest civilization thinning. The locket lay open in her palm. She'd pried it apart at the vet clinic, found no photos inside, just more engravings, a tiny map, etched into the interior landmarks, marked, and more numbers. SH 147.6 degrees north, 122.3 degrees west. Olympic Peninsula, SH 246.2 degrees north, 119.8 degrees west. Rich Land, W, ASH 345.5 degrees north, 122.7 degrees west. Oregon City, ORSH 444.0 degrees north, 121.3 degrees west. Bend, ORSH 548.5 degrees north, 113.9 degrees west. Kalispell, MT, 5 locations. SH Safe House Storage. The code 0816 appeared next to the first coordinates. Emily's birthday, reversed August 16th. Your grandfather was either paranoid or brilliant, Carol observed, glancing at the open locket. Maybe both. Those coordinates form a network across 4 states. What was he into? I thought he was a federal investigator, financial crimes. He worked for some government agency, retired 15 years ago. Rebecca traced the map with her fingertip. He used to tell me stories about catching white-collar criminals, people who stole millions and hid it in shell companies. I thought he was exaggerating to make his job sound exciting. Maybe he wasn't exaggerating. Carol merged around a slow-moving sedan. Maybe he was warning you. The Olympic Peninsula emerged from darkness as dawn broke gray and reluctant. Trees crowded the highway, Douglas firs reaching toward low cloud. Carol turned off at a rest stop, pulled out a paper map, actual paper, marked with highlighter and annotations. GPS doesn't work worth a damn out here. Too many trees. We'll navigate old school. They found the coordinates down a logging road that hadn't seen maintenance in years. Potholes deep enough to swallow tires. The truck couldn't make it. Carol parked at the turnoff, killed the engine. We walk from here, quarter mile maybe. Emily woke as they prepared to leave, her color, good eyes bright. Rebecca checked her blood sugar, 130 milligrams per deciliter. Perfect. She changed the insulin cartridge in Emily's pump, using supplies from the vet clinic, her hands steady with practiced routine. Where are we? Emily peered out the window at endless forest. Somewhere Grandpa Kenneth wanted us to find. Rebecca helped her daughter into a jacket. Remember the stories I told you about Great-Grandpa, how smart he was? Emily nodded. You said he could solve any puzzle. He left us a puzzle, and I think the answer is out there. The forest smelled of wet earth and rot mushrooms, growing on fallen logs, ferns, dripping with collected rain. Carol led the way with a flashlight, even though dawn had technically broken. The tree canopy was too thick to let in much light. Emily held Rebecca's hand, navigating roots and rocks with the resilience of children who adapt to anything. The first safe house appeared so suddenly, Rebecca almost missed it, a cabin built low to the ground, designed to disappear into the landscape. Moss covered the roof windows, boarded a rusted, condemned sign nailed to the door. But the steps were solid, recently reinforced, and when Rebecca brushed away moss from the doorframe, she found a modern keypad hidden beneath. Code 0816. Emily's birthday reversed. The keypad beeped acceptance. Something inside the door clicked mechanical and final. The handle turned under Rebecca's hand. The interior didn't match the exterior's decay. It was clean, maintained, stocked, like someone had been here recently. Firewood stacked neatly by a stone hearth. Pantry shelves lined with canned goods dates, showing they'd been restocked within the last 6 months. A camp stove, propane tanks, Medical supplies, including Rebecca's breath, caught insulin. A 30-day supply of Huyulin refrigerated in a battery-powered cooler. Carol whistled low. Your grandfather built a prepper's paradise. This place could sustain someone for months. Emily found the medical supplies, her small hands pulling out the insulin with the recognition of someone who knew its value. Mama looked great. Grandpa left you my medicine. Rebecca's eyes burned. Kenneth had thought of everything prepared for the exact scenario they found themselves in. He'd known she'd have Emily to protect, known they'd need insulin, known Richard, or someone like him, would force them here. An envelope sat on the rough wooden table, thick paper, yellowed at the edges. For Rebecca Lawson, urgent, written in Kenneth's angular script. Rebecca's hand shook as she opened it. The letter inside it was dated November 8th, 2022, 5 days before Kenneth's death. My dearest Rebecca, it began, and she had to sit down because her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. Emily climbed into her lap, and Rebecca read aloud, her voice breaking on every third word. If you're reading this, the worst has happened. You've been forced out. Thomas is dead, and Richard Thornton has Patricia in his claws. I'm dead too, but not from the stroke they'll claim. Richard poisoned me. Ricin in my coffee, slow enough to mimic natural illness. I figured it out too late. I have weeks left. What I'm about to tell you will sound insane. I wasn't just a federal investigator. I worked financial crimes for the OIG Office of Inspector General. In 2018, I uncovered a conspiracy. Military contractors and pharmaceutical companies colluding to inflate drug prices for VA hospitals. Insulin cancer drugs, antibiotics, billions siphoned through shell companies. Richard Thornton isn't a consultant. He's a cleaner. He destroys evidence, eliminates witnesses, makes problems disappear. He targeted Patricia to get close to my investigation files. I've hidden copies of everything across 5 safe houses. This cabin is number 1. The others have coordinates in the locket. I know you'll find it. You're too smart not to. Use a UV light on the engraving. You must reach Safe House 5 in Montana. That's where the master files are, physical documents unnumbered. Digital can be hacked, deleted. Paper last. Trust no one in law enforcement until you have all 5 pieces. The conspiracy goes high. FBI, DEA, Pentagon procurement. Protect Emily. Get the documents to Gary Stone, my old partner. Contact info in the next envelope. He'll know what to do. I love you, little architect. Build the case I couldn't finish. Kenneth. Attached was a Polaroid photo. Kenneth gaunt and hollow-eyed, holding that day's newspaper. November 10th, 2022, 3 days before his death. Proof he'd written this while dying, while the ricin ate him from inside. Rebecca couldn't breathe. Thomas's accident, the brakes that failed on I-5, the police ruling it mechanical failure murder. Kenneth's stroke that came so suddenly, so conveniently, after he'd started asking questions about pharmaceutical pricing murder. Patricia's mysterious illness, the weight loss and nausea, Richard blamed on stress, attempted murder. Everything was connected. Everything was intentional. And Rebecca held the evidence that could destroy them all. Carol had gone pale, reading over her shoulder. Jesus Christ! Your grandfather was investigating a multi-billion-dollar fraud ring, and they killed him for it. Emily didn't fully understand, but she understood danger, understood the adult fear saturating the room. Did the bad man hurt great-grandpa like he hurt Grandma? Rebecca pulled her daughter close, buried her face in Emily's hair. Yes, baby, but great-grandpa made sure we could fight back. He left us everything we need. The cabin had everything except answers to the immediate question, what now? They had Safe House 1 secured insulin for a month, canned food and water. They could hide here, wait for Richard to give up. Except Richard wouldn't give up, and Patricia was still in Portland, still being poisoned, still dying by degrees while Richard calculated his next move. Carol paced the cabin's single room, thinking aloud. Your grandfather mapped out 5 locations. Each one probably has a piece of the puzzle evidence documentation, something that builds the case. You need to reach Montana, compile everything, then take it to this Gary Stone person. That's an 800-mile journey across 4 states, with an 8-year-old diabetic. Rebecca's voice came out hollow. I have $500, no car, no plan. You have my truck? Carol said simply. And me if you want the company. My route's flexible. I can take personal time. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm telling you. That little girl deserves to grow up. Your mother deserves justice. And those bastards who inflated insulin prices. Carol's face twisted with old rage. They need to burn. My sister's husband is diabetic. They spend $600 a month on insulin, even with insurance. It's criminal. Rebecca wanted to argue, wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain some dignity. But dignity didn't keep Emily alive. Pride didn't expose corruption. Okay, she whispered. Thank you. The second envelope contained Gary Stone's contact information, a Seattle address, phone number, email. Kenneth's handwriting noted, retired OIG investigator. Worked the VA fraud case with me before it was shut down. He'll believe you. He'll help. Rebecca committed the information to memory, then did something she'd learned from Kenneth. She photographed every document with her phone, uploaded them to an encrypted cloud account she'd created during her paralegal days. Redundancy. Backup. Always have a failsafe. They spent the day at Safe House 1, letting Emily rest, letting Rebecca process the magnitude of what Kenneth had left them. Carol mapped the route to Safe House 2 in Richland, Washington, 150 miles east, a 3-hour drive in good weather. As night fell, Emily helped organize the canned goods by expiration date, making a game of it the way she made everything manageable. Great-grandpa was really smart, Mama. He knew exactly what we'd need. He knew I'd protect you no matter what, and he gave me the tools to do it. Rebecca watched her daughter work this small, fierce person who'd survived 3 years of needles and blood tests and hospital visits without losing her capacity for joy. You're the reason I'm brave, Emily. You know that. Emily looked up serious. You're brave because Great-grandpa taught you how to build things. He built this place. You're building our safety. 8 years old and already wise beyond her years. Rebecca's throat tightened. They left at dawn, Carol's truck loaded with supplies from Safe House, 1 extra insulin and canned goods, the camping stove. The coordinates for Safe House 2 glowed on Carol's GPS, Richland, Washington. Rebecca checked Emily's blood sugar before they pulled out 145 milligrams per deciliter. Stable. The drive took them through the Cascade Mountains elevation climbing until snow appeared on roadside embankments, despite it being December. Emily pressed her face to the window, delighted by the landscape's transformation. She'd lived her whole life in Portland's suburbs. Trees and mountains were abstractions from picture books. Carol tuned the radio to NPR, then abruptly turned it off. Don't need to hear more bad news. We're living enough of it. They stopped at a truck stop outside Yakima for fuel and food. Emily used the bathroom while Rebecca bought sandwiches and juice boxes with Patricia's emergency cash. She was counting change when her phone buzzed an unknown number, Portland area code. She answered. Hello, heavy breathing on the other end. Then Patricia's voice barely above a whisper. Rebecca! Oh, God, Rebecca! He knows you're gone. He came back. He's... Richard's voice sharp and cold. Rebecca Lawson, enjoying your little road trip. Rebecca's blood turned to ice. Carol noticed her expression moved closer, protective. What do you want, Richard? What you stole from me? The locket, the documents, whatever Kenneth hid. I know about the safe houses. I found his notes in Patricia's email. Sloppy, really. She should have used better encryption. Lies. Had to be lies. Patricia barely used email. But Richard's voice held certainty, and Rebecca's mind raced through possibilities. Maybe Kenneth had sent coordinates to Patricia as backup. Maybe Richard had hacked her mother's computer. I don't have anything you want. You have evidence that could destroy a $4 billion operation. People far more dangerous than me are very interested in retrieving it. Richard's voice dropped intimate and threatening. Here's what happens next. You bring me everything by midnight tomorrow. Portland, the address I'm texting to this number. Or Patricia dies. Not quickly, not cleanly, but very, very publicly. You're bluffing. Am I? Rustling sounds, Patricia's muffled cry. She's lost 12 pounds this month. The ricin is working nicely. I can accelerate it with one phone call to my associate. He has the concentrated dose ready. Or you can trade documents for your mother's life. The line went dead. Rebecca stared at her phone, fury and terror warring in her chest. Carol's hand on her shoulder grounding. What did he say? He wants the evidence. Threatens to kill my mother if I don't bring it to Portland by tomorrow midnight. Emily emerged from the bathroom, oblivious, chattering about the candy aisle. Carol steered them both back to the truck, her face grim. Once inside the cab, Emily settled in the sleeper berth. Carol spoke quietly. You can't go back. It's a trap. He'll kill all three of you. I know. Rebecca's hands shook. But Patricia is already dying. You said so yourself. This might be her last chance to save you. Carol started the engine, merged back onto the highway. The best thing you can do for your mother is finish what Kenneth started. Expose the conspiracy. Get justice. That's what she'd want. Rebecca knew it was true. Knew giving Richard the evidence meant betraying Kenneth's sacrifice, betraying every veteran who could died from rationed medication. But knowing didn't make it easier. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Portland. PD wellness check requested for Patricia Lawson, 442 Sycamore Drive. Please call ASAP. Someone had called the police. Maybe Patricia herself, in a moment when Richard wasn't watching. Maybe a neighbor who'd heard screaming. Either way, it bought time. Not much, but something. Rebecca called the number, identified herself as Patricia's daughter. The officer explained they'd responded to a domestic disturbance call, found Patricia alone and unharmed, Richard's whereabouts unknown. Your mother seemed disoriented, ma'am. We're recommending a medical evaluation. She refused transport to the hospital. She's being poisoned, the words spilled out. Her boyfriend, Richard Thornton, has been giving her ricin. Check her medical records. Unexplained weight loss, nausea, hair loss. Those are ricin symptoms. Silence on the line. Then, that's a serious accusation. I have evidence. My grandfather, Kenneth Lawson, was investigating pharmaceutical fraud before he died. Richard Thornton is part of it. He killed my grandfather. He's trying to kill my mother, and he's threatening me because I have proof. Ma'am, I'm going to transfer you to our detective division. The transfer took forever hold music interspersed with warnings about non-emergency lines. Then a woman's voice, professional and skeptical. "This is Detective Angela Morrison. I understand you're making allegations of poisoning and conspiracy." Rebecca repeated everything, the words tumbling out in a rush. Detective Morrison listened without interrupting, taking notes. Rebecca could hear the pen scratching. "Ms. Lawson, where are you currently?" "I can't tell you that. Richard has connections in law enforcement. My grandfather's letter warned me not to trust anyone until I have all the evidence." "Your grandfather's letter?" Morrison's tone shifted less skeptical. "Kenneth Lawson. I remember him. He worked OIG, investigated contractor fraud. Case got shut down by the feds about 4 years ago. He tried to go to media, got stonewalled." Hope flared. "You knew him." "I was a rookie detective when he came to PPD asking for help. My lieutenant shut him down, said it was federal jurisdiction. Kenneth was furious, said the corruption went all the way up, that local cops were his last chance." Morrison paused. 2 weeks later he had a stroke. We all thought well. Maybe we thought wrong. He was murdered, ricin poisoning over several weeks. I have his letter describing everything. I have coordinates to 5 safe houses where he hid evidence. I need to reach Montana, compile it all, then bring it to his partner, Gary Stone. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. "Montana's a long way from Portland." "I know. And you have a child with you, diabetic, according to the wellness check notes from this morning." Rebecca's stomach dropped. "How did you—" "Richard Thornton filed a missing persons report. Said you kidnapped your daughter. You're mentally unstable, dangerous. There's an Amber Alert pending approval." The world tilted. An Amber Alert meant every cop in the Pacific Northwest looking for them. Meant being stopped at the first traffic checkpoint. Meant Emily taken into custody. Rebecca arrested, evidence seized. "He's lying. I'm Emily's mother. I'm protecting her." "I believe you," Morrison's voice gentled. "But I can't stop the Amber Alert without evidence. What I can do is delay it. Give you 48 hours to get where you're going. After that, my hands are tied." "Why would you help me?" "Because Kenneth Lawson tried to expose something rotten, and the system failed him. Maybe I can make sure it doesn't fail you." Morrison's chair creaked. "Get to Montana. Get the evidence. And, Ms. Lawson, don't trust anyone who isn't Gary Stone. This thing is bigger than you know." The call ended. Rebecca sat frozen, phone in hand, processing. 48 hours. Richland was 3 hours away. Safe House 2 would have more evidence, more pieces of the puzzle. Then Oregon City Bend, and finally Montana, assuming they weren't caught first. Carol had been listening, her expression carefully neutral. "Amber Alert changes things." "I know. We'll have to avoid main highways, stick to back roads. It'll take longer." "I know." Emily poked her head through from the sleeper berth. "Mama, are the bad people coming?" Rebecca met her daughter's eyes, saw trust there, absolute and terrifying. "They're trying, baby, but we're smarter. Great-grandpa made sure of that." They drove. Richland emerged from eastern Washington's scrubland like a mirage, industrial parks and strip malls. Squatting beside the Columbia River, the whole town built on Cold War bones when Hanford Seidat produced plutonium for nuclear weapons. Carol navigated the truck through streets that all looked identical warehouse districts, bleeding into residential neighborhoods designed by accountants who'd never heard of charm. The coordinates led to an industrial area near the rail yards, buildings condemned after the 2008 recession and left to rot. Safe House 2 occupied a foreclosed dentist's office windows, soaped over weeds cracking through the parking lot asphalt. The sign still hung askew, Dr. Brennan's Family Dentistry, now closed. Rebecca checked Emily's blood sugar before they left the truck, 152 milligrams per deciliter. Good. The insulin from Safe House 1 was doing its job, the pump's reservoir showing enough for another day. Small mercies in the middle of catastrophe. The keypad hid behind a loose brick beside the service entrance, barely visible unless you knew to look. Rebecca entered the code 618. Oh, Emily's birthday reversed, and the lock disengaged with a pneumatic hiss that seemed too modern for the building's decay. Inside smelled like bleach and abandonment dental chairs, still positioned in examining rooms like artifacts from another era. But the supply closet at the back had been retrofitted, its rear panel sliding away to reveal a space Kenneth had carved from the building's guts. Shelves lined with plastic storage bins, a camp table, battery-powered lanterns. Carol swept the room with her flashlight, professional and thorough. Your grandfather was something else. This took planning, money, time. He spent his whole retirement preparing for this. Rebecca opened the first bin, found it packed with manila folders, each tab labeled with dates and case numbers. He knew they'd come for him eventually, he just didn't know when. The briefcase was military-grade aluminum shell with combination locks. Kenneth had left the combination on a post-it note stuck to the lid, 0816, Emily's birthday forward this time. Inside, 300 pages of documentation organized with the precision of someone who'd spent 40 years building legal cases. VA Hospital Procurement, 2017 to 2019. Invoice after invoice showing insulin and vials billed at $800 per unit when the actual manufacturing cost was $15. Contracts signed by hospital administrators, countersigned by pharmaceutical representatives, all funneling through shell companies with names designed to sound legitimate. Med Supply Solutions, LLC, Healthcare. Logistics, Inc. Veterans, Medical Partners. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor, arranging papers by date like it was homework. Like this was normal. Maybe for her it was her whole life had been medical crisis management, learning to adapt when normal kids were learning to ride bikes. Mama, these numbers are really big. She held up an invoice. $800 for one vial. That's more than my birthday present money, for like ever. Rebecca's throat tightened. Bad people were stealing money from sick veterans, baby. Soldiers who fought for our country couldn't afford their medicine because these people made it too expensive. That's mean. Emily's face scrunched with the uncomplicated moral clarity of childhood. Great-grandpa was trying to stop them. Yes, and now we're finishing what he started. Carol had found a second folder, this one containing bank statements and wire transfer records. Her face went pale reading. Jesus, look at this. Med Supply Solutions, owned by a holding company called Apex Healthcare Ventures. And Apex is owned by, she looked up, eyes hard, Richard Thornton, your mother's boyfriend. Not boyfriend, murderer, but the documentation made it real. In a way, Richard's threats hadn't seeing his signature on incorporation papers, seeing his name on bank accounts, holding millions in fraudulent profits. He hadn't just targeted Patricia randomly. He'd known exactly who Kenneth was, what Kenneth had discovered, and he'd moved into their lives with surgical precision. There's more. Carol flipped pages, finding email printouts. Communication between Richard and someone named Dr. Donald Pierce, medical director at a pharmaceutical consulting firm. Look at this one from March 2019. Prioritize high-volume insulin prescribers. Diabetic patient base is captive market. They'll pay whatever we charge because the alternative is death. The words hit like physical blows. They'd calculated it weaponized human desperation turned Emily's disease into profit. Rebecca thought about the nights she'd lain awake doing math insulin cost versus rent versus food versus keeping the lights on. Thought about the support group parents who'd admitted to rationing their kids' doses playing Russian roulette with ketoacidosis because they couldn't afford the prescribed amount. They weren't just stealing from the government. Rebecca's voice came out strangled. They were killing people. Veterans who couldn't afford rationed doses went into decay, had heart attacks, strokes. The mortality rate for uncontrolled diabetes is... She couldn't finish. Emily was watching her, frightened by the emotion in her mother's voice. Carol's hand found Rebecca's shoulder, squeezed. We're going to stop them. This documentation is enough to prosecute. We just need to get it to the right people. Rebecca photographed every page with her phone uploading to the encrypted cloud account. Redundancy. Always redundancy. Then packed the physical files into a backpack Carol produced from the truck, a beat-up JanSport that had probably seen 1,000 truck stops. They were almost finished when Emily suddenly went still, her head tilted. "Mama, I hear a car." Rebecca froze, listening. Nothing. Then, yes. Engine noise distant but approaching. Too coincidental. Too targeted. Carol moved to the window, peered through a gap in the soaped glass. Black SUV, tinted windows, parking across the street. Her voice went flat. Someone followed us. Impossible. They'd taken back roads, avoided main highways, checked mirrors obsessively. Unless Rebecca's mind raced. The truck, Carol's commercial vehicle, had GPS tracking for fleet management. Richard, or whoever he worked with, could have accessed the DOT database, found Carol's route. We need to leave, now. Rebecca grabbed Emily, hoisted the backpack. Is there another exit? Carol was already moving, leading them through the back examining rooms toward a rear door that opened onto an alley. But as they reached it, that door swung inward, revealing a man who filled the frame, 6'2", 200 pounds of muscle, tactical gear gun drawn. Brandon Cole. Had to be. The hired killer Richard mentioned on the phone, the associate with the concentrated ricin dose. His face was unremarkable, forgettable, the kind of bland handsomeness that disappeared in crowds. His eyes were flat professional. Rebecca Lawson? Not a question. Step away from the child. Carol moved between them and Brandon, her body a shield. Over my dead body. That can be arranged. Brandon's gun never wavered, trained center mass on Carol. I'm not interested in witnesses, just the documents and the woman. The kid and the truck driver can walk if they cooperate. You're lying. Rebecca's voice shook but held. You'll kill all of us. Probably. Brandon almost smiled. But there's a chance I won't. Better odds than forcing me to shoot through a civilian to get to you. Emily whimpered, pressing her face into Rebecca's shoulder. The insulin pump beeped blood sugar alert. Rebecca glanced at the monitor clipped to Emily's waistband, 68 milligrams per deciliter. Dropping. Stress response, adrenaline burning glucose faster than the pump could deliver insulin. They needed juice, needed glucose, tablets, needed time Emily didn't have. Carol's shoulders tensed, readying for something stupid and brave. "Rebecca, when I move, you run. Out the front, get to the truck drive. I can't leave you." "You can and you will. That girl needs you alive." Brandon's finger moved to the trigger. Noble? Pointless. Last chance to. The explosion shattered the front window's glass and wood shrapnel screaming through the building. Brandon spun toward the sound gun tracking. Carol used the distraction, charged him low and hard, a linebacker tackle that drove him backward into the alley. Rebecca ran. Through the examining rooms, Emily bouncing against her hip, backpack slamming her spine. Behind them, gunshots, 1, 2, 3. Rebecca didn't look back, couldn't look back, just ran through the front entrance, where smoke billowed from what used to be a parked SUV, now a burning chassis. Carol's truck sat 50 yards away. Keys. Where were the keys? Carol had them. Carol was movement in her peripheral vision. Brandon emerging from the side of the building, Carol nowhere visible. He was limping left shoulder, dark with blood, but the gun was still up, still tracking. Rebecca threw herself and Emily behind a concrete planter as bullets punched holes in the dentist office's facade. Emily screamed. The sound cut through Rebecca's panic like a blade, not fear for herself, but primal terror that her daughter would watch her die. Sirens, distant but approaching. Someone had called 911 about the explosion, about the gunfire. Brandon heard them too, his head cocking. He looked at Rebecca, at the burning SUV, calculating odds. This isn't over. He backed toward a motorcycle parked in the alley, mounted it one-handed despite the shoulder wound, and roared away before Rebecca could get a license plate. Carol staggered out of the building, her right arm hanging, useless blood soaking through her Seahawks jacket. "Go. Police coming. Can't be here when they arrive." "You're shot. Shoulder. I'll live. But you won't if cops find you and run that Amber Alert." Carol fumbled in her pocket, tossed keys, one-handed. "Truck's yours. Get to Oregon City, Safe House 3. I'll catch up when I can." "Carol, go." The word came out as a roar. "I didn't get shot, so you could waste it crying." Rebecca grabbed the keys, carried Emily to the truck, strapped her into the passenger seat. Emily's monitor showed 62 milligrams per deciliter, still dropping. Rebecca dug through their medical supplies, found juice boxes, made Emily drink while her hand shook so badly she could barely hold the straw. In the rearview mirror, Carol sat on the curb, good hand pressed to her shoulder wound, watching them drive away. Fire trucks arrived, police cars, an ambulance. Carol raised her hand in a weak wave, then turned to face the authorities with whatever story she'd concocted. Rebecca drove, just drove, east out of Richland on Highway 12, merging onto I-82 south before anyone could establish roadblocks. Behind them, smoke from the burning SUV rose black against the desert sky. Emily's blood sugar stabilized at 85 milligrams per deciliter after 2 juice boxes and a granola bar. Color returned to her cheeks. Rebecca's hands eventually stopped shaking enough to grip the wheel without white knuckles. 15 miles outside Richland, Rebecca pulled into a rest stop and threw up in the bathroom sink, her body finally processing what had just happened. A man had pointed a gun at her daughter. Carol had been shot protecting them. They'd left a crime scene, fled from police, and now they were driving a stolen truck. Technically not stolen, since Carol gave permission, but try explaining that to a cop running plates. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Nice try in Richland, but you're running out of places to hide. RT. Richard, somehow tracking them, somehow staying ahead." Rebecca wanted to throw the phone, smash it, but it held all her photos of the evidence, all her proof. Another text arrived, this one from Detective Morrison. Heard about incident in Richland. Officer involved shooting, civilian injured. Was that you? Rebecca's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Lying to police was a crime, but so was everything else she'd done in the past 48 hours. She typed, "We're okay. Emily's okay. Heading to next location." Morrison's response came fast. "Amber Alert approved. Goes live in 6 hours. Whatever you're doing, do it faster." 6 hours. Oregon City was 4 hours south if Rebecca pushed speed limits. Safe House 3, then Bend, then the long haul to Montana. They could do it. Maybe. If Brandon didn't find them first, if Richard didn't anticipate their route, if Emily's blood sugar stayed stable, if 1,000 things went right that had no business going right. Emily dozed in the passenger seat, head lolling against the window, her small body finally surrendering to exhaustion. Rebecca drove through the Columbia River Gorge, the landscape transforming from desert to forest altitude climbing. The truck handled poorly. 18-wheelers weren't meant for mountain roads, but Carol had taught her the basics during the drive north. How to downshift on descents, how to use engine braking. Safe House 3's coordinates placed it in Oregon City, a suburb south of Portland. Too close to home, too close to Richard, but Kenneth's network had its own logic, each location serving a purpose in the larger plan. Rebecca's phone rang. Gary Stone, Kenneth's old partner. She'd texted him that morning with an update, proof she was following through on Kenneth's plan. His voice was gravelly, a lifetime of cigarettes and suspicion. "Rebecca, heard you had trouble in Richland. How did you—" "I still have friends in law enforcement. Word travels when there's an officer-involved shooting at a location connected to Kenneth's investigation." Gary's chair creaked. "You get the documents from Safe House 2. "Yes. VA Hospital Procurement Fraud Shell Company, records, bank transfers, all pointing to Richard Thornton and Dr. Donald Pierce." "Pierce?" Gary spat the name like poison. "He's the linchpin, runs the pharmaceutical consulting firm that coordinates pricing across manufacturers. Richard's just the cleaner, the guy who makes problems disappear. Pierce is the architect." Rebecca merged onto I-205, Portland sprawl, visible in the distance. Mount Hood rising beyond, like a warning. Kenneth's letter said the conspiracy goes high. How high? Pentagon procurement senators on appropriations committees, FBI officials who bury investigations. When Kenneth and I tried to blow the whistle in 2019, our case disappeared overnight. Witnesses recanted. Documents vanished from evidence lockers. We were reassigned to desk jobs reviewing parking tickets. Bitterness dripped from every word. They broke Kenneth, sent him into retirement early with a gag order and a pension. I thought he'd given up. He didn't give up. He just went underground. Stubborn bastard. Gary's voice softened. He loved you, you know. Talked about you constantly. Said you were the only one smart enough to finish what he started. Rebecca's eyes burned. I'm not smart. I'm just desperate. Same thing sometimes. Look, you need to get those documents public before Richard or Pierce silence you. I'm contacting journalists I trust. Washington Post, ProPublica. Once the story breaks, killing you becomes pointless. What about my mother? Richard threatened her. Silence stretched. Then, Patricia made her choice when she recorded that confession for you. She's buying you time. Don't waste it. The call ended. Rebecca drove through Oregon City's outskirts, following the GPS to coordinates that led to a light industrial park. Safe House. 3 occupied a veterinary supply warehouse, the kind of place that serviced rural clinics, long since shuttered. The keypad was hidden inside a junction box on the building's north side. Code 6180. The door opened onto darkness that smelled like chemicals and old cardboard. Rebecca found the light switch, and fluorescence stuttered to life, revealing rows of empty shelving. The safe room was built into the foundation, accessed through a floor panel that lifted on hydraulic pistons when Rebecca entered the secondary code on a recessed pad. Below a concrete vault, maybe 10 feet square, climate-controlled, stocked with more evidence bins. This cache focused on a different angle: doctor kickbacks, pharmaceutical representatives bribing VA physicians to prescribe specific insulin brands regardless of patient need. Spreadsheets tracking payments, emails with subject lines like monthly performance bonuses and prescriber incentive program. Photos of doctors receiving awards at conferences sponsored by the same companies paying them under the table. And in the center of it all, a memo on Dr. Donald Pierce's letterhead. To regional sales directors, re-market penetration strategy. Our goal is 100% insulin market share within VA system by Q4 2020. Tactics: ensure formulary committees approve only our products. Provide consulting fees to high-volume prescribers. Delay generic approvals through FDA channels we control. Remember, diabetics can't switch to competitors without risking their lives. We have them captive. Rebecca read it twice, 3 times, the casual cruelty etched in corporate speak. They'd engineered a monopoly on life-saving medication, then extracted maximum profit, because what choice did diabetics have? Emily had woken during the descent into the vault, her eyes adjusting to the artificial light. She wandered the small space, trailing fingers along storage bins, examining Kenneth's organizational system with the focus she usually reserved for puzzles. Great-grandpa was very organized. She opened a bin, found it full of flash drives. "Mama, what's on these?" Rebecca checked the label: audio recordings, Pierce/Thornton calls, 2018 to 2022. Kenneth had wiretapped them. Somehow, impossibly, he'd intercepted their communications and preserved them as evidence. Backup, in case the papers aren't enough. Rebecca packed the flash drives into the backpack alongside the Richland documents. The bag was getting heavy, dense with proof of crimes that stretched across years and states. They were preparing to leave when Emily suddenly grabbed Rebecca's arm. "Mama, listen." Footsteps overhead, multiple people, heavy boots on concrete, then voices muffled through the floor. "Told you she'd come here." Lawson's grandfather was predictable. 5 safe houses in a geographic pattern, each containing evidence pieces. Richard. His voice carried that smug certainty, the tone of someone who'd anticipated every move. Rebecca's blood went cold. A second voice, older cultured: "Then we destroy them all, starting with this one. Burn everything, salt the earth. No evidence, no case." Dr. Pierce. Had to be. The photographs in the documents showed him 60, silver hair, expensive suits, the kind of face that smiled in board meetings while people died from his decisions. Rebecca looked around the vault desperately. One exit the floor panel they'd entered through. No windows, no secondary escape. They were trapped 10 feet underground, while their hunters stood directly above. Emily's face had gone white, her breathing quick and shallow. Not panic, a blood sugar crash. Rebecca checked the monitor, 58 milligrams per deciliter. Too low, dropping fast. The stress, the fear burning through glucose, Emily didn't have to spare. She needed to treat the low, needed juice or glucose tablets, but they were in the backpack, and making noise now would alert Richard and Pierce. Catch 22. Stay silent and watch Emily crash into hypoglycemic unconsciousness, or save her and announce their location. Not a choice. Never a choice. Rebecca grabbed a juice box from the backpack, the cellophane crinkling like thunder in the vault's silence. The footsteps overhead stopped. Richard's voice sharp with triumph. "Did you hear that? They're here, in the building." More footsteps, faster now, searching. Rebecca forced the juice box straw between Emily's lips, whispering urgently, "Drink, baby, fast as you can." Emily sucked weakly, her coordination already suffering from the glucose drop. Rebecca's mind raced through scenarios. Richard and Pierce would find the floor panel. Eventually, Kenneth's camouflage was good, but not perfect. And there was only one exit, only one way out. Unless... Rebecca pulled out her phone, hands shaking, and dialed 911. The operator's voice calm and professional. 911, what's your emergency? I'm trapped in a basement at... Rebecca checked the address on Kenneth's documentation, 4150 Industrial Way, Oregon City. 2 men are trying to kill me and my 8-year-old daughter. One is Richard Thornton, wanted for assault and poisoning. Please send police. Overhead, Richard's voice, urgent. She's calling the cops. We need to move. Now. Pierce. Burn it. We'll claim squatters started the fire. Smoke smell acrid and immediate. They were serious. They'd burn the building with Rebecca and Emily inside, destroy the evidence and the witnesses in one efficient move. The 911 operator was talking, requesting details, but Rebecca cut her off. Fire! They're setting a fire. Please hurry! She hung up, calculated time. Police response in this area, maybe 8 minutes. Fire department 10. Smoke inhalation would incapacitate them in 5. The floor panel was their only option. Rebecca positioned Emily on her back, piggyback style, secured the backpack across her chest. The hydraulics lifted them slowly, agonizingly slow, while smoke filtered down through gaps in the panel seal. They emerged into chaos. Fire had caught on old packaging material, flames racing up shelving units, smoke thick enough to choke. Rebecca couldn't see more than 10 feet. She oriented by memory entrance to the east, maybe 40 yards through the maze of shelving. A figure materialized from the smoke. Richard, eyes watering, but focused, a crowbar in his hands. End of the line, Rebecca. Give me the backpack, and I'll let you walk out. You'll kill us anyway. Probably. He smiled, that same cold calculation. But there's a chance I won't. Better odds than burning alive. Emily coughed, her body convulsing against Rebecca's back. Rebecca's chest burned from smoke inhalation, her vision graying at the edges. Richard stepped closer, crowbar raised. The crash came from the west, the loading dock door exploding inward as a commercial vehicle rammed through. Carol's truck, the one Rebecca had driven here now, piloted by someone else, through a wall of flames and smoke. The driver's door opened, and Carol stumbled out, her wounded arm in a sling-good hand gripping a tire iron. "Rebecca, this way!" Richard turned toward the new threat. Rebecca ran, carrying Emily through smoke that scraped lungs raw. Carol met them halfway, grabbed Rebecca's arm, hauled them toward the truck. Behind them, Richard's scream of rage. Then sirens close and getting closer. Police fire trucks, the cavalry arriving exactly too late to prevent anything but useful for keeping Richard and Pierce from pursuing. They piled into the truck, Carol somehow driving one-handed, reversing through the loading dock opening as flames engulfed the building. Police cars screeched into the parking lot, officers jumping out with guns drawn. Carol didn't stop, didn't slow, just drove blasting through a weak section of chain-link fence into an adjoining lot, then onto surface streets while chaos erupted behind them. Emily's blood sugar had climbed to 72 milligrams per deciliter from the juice stable enough. Rebecca's lungs felt shredded, every breath painful. Carol's shoulder wound had reopened blood, soaking through the bandage. "You came back." Rebecca's voice came out a rasp. "Told the cops in Richland I was a good Samaritan who got shot by random gang violence. They bought it long enough for me to get stitched and released." Carol winced, shifting gears with her good hand. "Tracked your phone's GPS. Got here just in time. Richard was going to kill us. He still might, but not today." They drove south through Oregon City's suburbs, merging onto I-5 away from the burning warehouse. Rebecca checked her phone messages from Detective Morrison, from Gary Stone, from unknown numbers that were probably Richard trying new tactics. One message stood out, sent 10 minutes ago, from Patricia's number, a YouTube link with no text. Rebecca's thumb hovered over it. Patricia hadn't texted in weeks, maybe months. Richard controlled her phone, monitored her contacts. This had to be a trap, Richard using Patricia's account to lure Rebecca into clicking malware. But something in her gut, some mother-daughter instinct, said otherwise. She clicked. The video loaded slowly on the truck's cellular connection. Then Patricia's face filled the screen, gaunt and bruised, sitting in what looked like the master bedroom at 442 Sycamore Drive. The timestamp showed 6:47 a.m. that morning while Rebecca and Emily were driving to Richland. Patricia's voice weak but determined. "My name is Patricia Lawson. I'm recording this because I'll probably be dead soon, and I need someone to know what happened. Richard Thornton has been poisoning me for 3 months. Ricin, in my vitamins in tea he makes specially for me. I didn't realize until my daughter told me, and by then it was too late." She coughed, the sound wet and terrible. Continued, "Richard murdered my father, Kenneth Lawson. Made it look like a stroke. Richard murdered my son-in-law, Thomas. Made it look like mechanical failure. And now he's trying to kill my daughter Rebecca and granddaughter Emily because they have evidence of fraud, pharmaceutical fraud, that's killed hundreds of veterans." Patricia held up documents, Kenneth's handwriting visible. "My father left proof. 5 safe houses with evidence. Rebecca is collecting it to expose the truth. If anything happens to her or Emily, Richard Thornton did it. Dr. Donald Pierce ordered it. And this video is my testimony." Her hands shook, lowering the papers. "Rebecca, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. Sorry I chose comfort over courage. Sorry I let Richard into our lives. Sorry I wasn't strong enough to protect you, but I'm choosing now. I've set this video to publish automatically in 48 hours unless I cancel it. If I'm alive, I'll cancel. If not—" She smiled, tears streaming. "Then Richard loses anyway. I love you, baby. I love Emily. Finish what Grandpa Kenneth started." The video ended. Rebecca couldn't breathe. Emily was crying quietly. Carol pulled the truck onto a side road, killed the engine, gave them space to process. Patricia had weaponized her own death, turned her murder into insurance, into a dead man's switch that would activate if Richard succeeded. The video was already uploaded, already scheduled, already beyond Richard's control. Killing Patricia now would only guarantee its release. Unless Richard found a way to access Patricia's account, delete the scheduled post. Unless he forced her to cancel it before the 48 hours elapsed. Unless 100 things that could go wrong did go wrong. Rebecca checked the timestamp again. Posted 6 hours ago, 42 hours remaining before publication. Her phone buzzed. Detective Morrison, saw your mother's video. It's spreading on social media. Someone leaked it before the auto-publish. 3 million views in the past hour. FBI opening formal investigation into Richard Thornton and Dr. Donald Pierce. You need to come in. Now. Protective custody. 3 million views. The secret was out spreading faster than Richard could contain, but protective custody meant Emily taken into state care while Rebecca testified, meant months of legal proceedings, meant trusting a system that had already failed Kenneth once. Gary Stone called. Rebecca answered on speaker. The video changed everything. His voice carried urgency. Washington Post wants to interview you. ProPublica is running a full expose. But you need the Montana documents, the master files. That's what proves the scope, the money trail, all the way to Pentagon procurement. Montana's 500 miles from here. Then drive fast. Once the Post publishes, Richard and Pierce become radioactive. Nobody will risk protecting them. But until then, they're fighting for survival, and survivors are dangerous. Carol had been listening, her expression calculating. Ben's on the way to Montana. Safe House 4. We should grab those documents too, consolidate everything before the final push. Rebecca looked at Emily, sleeping now, exhausted from adrenaline crashes and blood sugar swings. Her daughter deserved safety, deserved a childhood that wasn't running from hired killers and burning buildings. But those veterans deserved justice, deserved someone to care that their medication had been weaponized against them. And Kenneth had believed Rebecca was strong enough to deliver it. We go to Bend. Her voice came out steady, surprising herself. Then Montana. We finish this. Carol nodded, restarted the truck. They merged back onto I-5, heading south into gathering darkness. Behind them, Oregon City's sky glowed orange from the warehouse fire. Ahead, the Cascade Mountains rose like teeth. Rebecca's phone lit up with incoming messages, reporters requesting interviews, strangers offering support, trolls calling Patricia's video fake. She turned off notifications, focused on what mattered. Emily stirred, mumbled in her sleep, Mama, did we win? Not yet, baby, but we're close. The drive to Bend took 4 hours through mountain passes where snow accumulated on roadside banks, despite it being December. Carol drove with practiced efficiency, her wounded shoulder clearly painful, but her hands steady on the wheel. They stopped once for gas at a truck stop outside Sisters, Oregon, where Rebecca bought sandwiches and juice boxes with the last of Patricia's emergency cash. The truck stop TV played CNN, Patricia's video on loop, talking heads analyzing every frame. A banner scrolled beneath, Whistleblower's daughter, sought by FBI, protective custody offered. Rebecca's photo, years old from her paralegal firm ID, filled the screen. Emily's school picture beside it. The cashier glanced from the TV to Rebecca, recognition dawning. Rebecca grabbed the food and ran, expecting shouting, expecting police calls. but the cashier just watched them go, expression unreadable. In the truck, Emily ate mechanically, monitoring her own blood sugar with the competence of someone 3 times her age. 142 milligrams per deciliter. Perfect. The insulin pump's reservoir showed 10 units remaining, enough for another 6 hours if they stretched it. Bend appeared as a scattering of lights in high desert darkness, the Cascade Peaks invisible against the night sky. Safe House 4's coordinates led to the outskirts, an abandoned vacation cabin development that had failed during the housing crash. The cabin sat at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by ponderosa pines and silence. Rebecca approached cautiously, scanning for vehicles for signs of ambush. The keypad was camouflaged as a gas meter, code 6180. The door swung inward. Brandon Cole stood in the darkness, gun pointed center mass at Rebecca's chest. Wondered how long you'd take. Come in, all of you. Carol's hand moved toward the tire iron still in the truck cab. Brandon's gun shifted to Emily. Don't. I will shoot the child if you give me reason. And before you calculate odds, understand, I've killed 47 people in my career. 3 were children. It doesn't bother me. The casual admission hung in the air like cordite. Rebecca stepped inside, hands raised. Carol followed Emily, pressed against her mother's side. The cabin's interior had been trashed, storage bins opened, and emptied documents scattered. Kenneth's careful organization destroyed. Brandon had found it first, ransacked it, and waited. Richard called off the contract. Brandon's voice held professional detachment. Said the video made everything too hot, that killing you now would just confirm everything. But Pierce overruled him, offered me double to finish the job before you reach Montana. So you're here to kill us. Eventually. Brandon gestured with the gun toward the floor. Sit, all of you. There's a process to these things. Quick deaths raise questions. But if you accidentally started a fire while squatting, got trapped, died from smoke inhalation. He shrugged. Tragic. Believable. They sat. Brandon cable-tied their wrists with the efficiency of someone who'd done this countless times. Carol's wounded shoulder made her gasp as the plastic bit into torn flesh. Emily whimpered, but didn't cry, her face set in lines too mature for 8 years old. Brandon worked methodically, checking each binding, ensuring they couldn't slip free. Then he produced a road flare from his jacket, began pouring gasoline from a jerry can around the cabin's perimeter. Nothing personal. He struck the flare, the magnesium head sparking red. I am sure you're lovely people, but $500,000 buys a lot of moral flexibility. The flare touched gasoline. Flames raced along the floor, catching on furniture, on scattered documents, on everything Kenneth had built. Heat billowed, immediate and terrifying. Brandon walked toward the door, paused. Smoke inhalation usually takes 3 to 5 minutes. Try not to panic, it just makes it worse. He left. The door clicked shut. The cable ties held firm. Rebecca's mind raced through options while flames climbed walls, while smoke thickened. The ties were professional grade, designed to restrain until death. Carol's good hand scrabbled at hers uselessly. Emily had gone silent, shock settling over her like a blanket. The backpack. Still across Rebecca's chest, the evidence inside everything they'd collected from 3 safe houses. Kenneth's proof, 3 years of meticulous work, burning. She couldn't reach her hands to the bag's zipper with wrists bound, but she could shift her shoulders, could angle the pack until it slid down her arms to her lap. The zipper yielded to her nose, to teeth, to desperate motion. Inside, flash drives, documents, and the insulin pump supplies she'd packed at Safe House 1, including the Lancet device for fingerstick blood tests, spring-loaded needle sharp enough to draw blood through calloused fingers, sharp enough to cut plastic. Rebecca angled the device against her cable ties to press the button. The Lancet snapped out, barely penetrated the plastic. Again. 15 times 20, each puncture weakening the binding while smoke filled her lungs and flames crept closer. The tie snapped. Her hands free, she grabbed the Lancet device, cut Carol's bindings, then Emily's. 3 minutes gone. Maybe 2 minutes before unconsciousness. The door was locked from outside, windows boarded. Fire blocked the front entrance. Rebecca's oxygen-starved brain struggled to process. Then the floor. Kenneth wouldn't build a safe house without an escape route. She kicked aside burning documents, found a trapdoor hidden beneath where the storage bins had stood. No lock, just a recessed handle. She yanked it open, revealing a crawl space. And beyond that, stars. Go! Rebecca shoved Emily through first, then Carol, followed them into cold December air while the cabin exploded behind them, propane tank igniting in a fireball that lit the ponderosa pines like noon. They ran, through forest, through darkness, Emily stumbling and Rebecca catching her, Carol breathing in pained gasps. Behind them, flames climbed 50 feet high, consuming everything. The truck sat where they'd left it, keys still in the ignition. Brandon's motorcycle was gone. He'd parked it out of sight, left before the explosion. Rebecca didn't care about the tactical implications, just drove wheels spinning on dirt road before finding purchase. Emily checked her blood sugar in the bouncing cab, 201 milligrams per deciliter, high from stress. The pump's reservoir flashed red, 2 units remaining. They'd lost the insulin supplies in the fire, lost Kenneth's careful stockpiles, lost everything except what they carried. We have maybe 4 hours before Emily needs more insulin. Rebecca's voice came out, mechanical shock settling in. There's no Safe House supplies left. We're down to what's in her pump and the vial from Safe House 1. Carol's good hand gripped the dashboard. How far to Montana? 600 miles. 10 hours if we drive straight through. Then we drive straight through. They merged onto Highway 97 North, leaving Ben's lights behind. The backpack sat in Emily's lap, singed at the edges, but intact. 3 safe houses worth of evidence. Enough to prosecute. Maybe, if they lived to deliver it. Rebecca's phone buzzed with an incoming call, Detective Morrison. She answered on speaker. Morrison's voice was tight. Where are you? Leaving Bend. Someone tried to kill us. Again. I know. Fire department responded to cabin blaze. Found accelerant patterns consistent with arson. Where's Brandon Cole? Gone. He tied us up, started the fire, left us to die. We got out through a crawl space. Morrison was quiet for a beat. Rebecca, you need to come in. This is beyond protective custody now. Pierce and Richard are facing federal charges. The Attorney General personally requested your testimony. We can protect you. You couldn't protect Kenneth, couldn't protect the whistleblowers before him. Rebecca's exhaustion bled into her voice. I'm finishing this. Montana. Then I'll come in. Montana's not in my jurisdiction. I can't help you there. Then I'll help myself. She hung up. Carol glanced over, expression worried. That was a federal agent offering protection. You sure about this? No, but I'm sure about Kenneth. He died because the system failed him. I won't let that happen again." They drove through the night through high desert that stretched endless under stars. Emily slept fitfully, her blood sugar spiking and crashing as stress hormones played havoc with her system. Carol's shoulder wound had started bleeding again, the bandage soaked through. Around 3 a.m. passing through Grass Range, Montana. Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text from Gary Stone. Washington Post running story in Morning Edition. Pierce and Richard named evidence detailed. FBI raiding Apex Healthcare headquarters at dawn. You did it. Relief should have flooded through her. Instead, Rebecca felt hollow. They'd exposed the conspiracy, yes, but Kenneth was still dead. Thomas was still dead. Patricia was still dying. Justice didn't resurrect the murdered. Another text, this one from Patricia's number, canceled the video, auto-publish. Police came. Richard arrested. I'm in hospital stable. So proud of you, baby. Rebecca started crying, then silent tears that wouldn't stop. Emily woke, saw her mother's face wrapped small arms around her. "Mama, why are you sad? We're winning." "I know, baby. Sometimes winning still hurts." The coordinates for Safe House 5 led to Kalispell, Montana, a small city near Glacier National Park, tucked against the Rockies. Dawn broke gray and cold as they approached snow beginning to fall in fat, lazy flakes. The final safe house occupied a storage unit facility, one unit among hundreds in a sprawling complex. Kenneth's key opened Unit 237. Inside filing cabinets, a desk, a camp chair. The master archived everything organized with the precision of a man who knew his time was limited. 5 years of investigation condensed into paper. Contracts, emails, recorded phone calls, whistleblower affidavits, forensic accounting that traced every dollar from Pentagon appropriations through shell companies to offshore accounts. The complete money trail provable and damning. And on the desk, a final letter. Rebecca, if you made it this far, you're stronger than I ever imagined. Everything you need is here. The truth, the proof, the names of journalists who'll help Gary has their contacts. Don't mourn me. I died doing what mattered, protecting you, protecting Emily, protecting the veterans they victimized. You asked me once why I became an investigator. I said it was about justice. That was partly true. But really, it was about building something that lasts. A case so solid, so complete, that it survives the investigator. You're my case now, my legacy, my truth that lasts. Love, Kenneth. Rebecca read it 3 times, memorizing every word. Then she photographed it, uploaded it to the cloud account, and packed it with the rest. Emily had found a box labeled "For Emily Lawson, College Fund." Inside, bearer bonds worth $200,000. Instructions for converting them to education savings, a note in Kenneth's handwriting. "For my great-granddaughter who'll change the world if someone gives her the chance." Carol stood by the door, keeping watch. "We should move. Gary's expecting you at his office in Seattle. That's 8 hours back west." Rebecca looked at the archive, at 5 years of Kenneth's life, distilled to facts and figures. Then at Emily, checking her blood sugar one more time before the pump ran dry. 127 milligrams per deciliter. Stable. Perfect. Alive. We move. They locked the storage unit, climbed back into Carol's battered truck, and drove toward Seattle as snow fell heavier, as the sun climbed reluctant into a winter sky, as somewhere in Portland, federal agents arrested Dr. Donald Pierce, on charges that would end his career and maybe his freedom. The radio played a news bulletin. Breaking overnight massive pharmaceutical fraud scandal rocks Pentagon. Hundreds of officials implicated. Attorney General promises full investigation. Rebecca turned it off. She'd lived the story, didn't need to hear it retold. Emily dozed against her shoulder. Carol drove one-handed stoic despite the pain. And Rebecca closed her eyes, finally letting exhaustion take her, trusting for the first time in days that they might actually survive this. Kenneth's voice in her memory from that last conversation before his death. The answer is always in the blueprint, little architect. Build something that lasts. She had, they all had, a case, a truth, a legacy. Now they just had to make it stick. Gary Stone's office occupied the third floor of a building in Seattle's Pioneer Square, wedged between a vintage record shop and a bail bondsman. The elevator creaked with age cables groaning under the weight of 3 people and a backpack stuffed with evidence that could topple an industry. Rebecca hadn't slept in 36 hours. Emily dozed against her shoulder, the insulin pump finally replaced with a fresh cartridge Gary had waiting. He'd anticipated their needs with the same precision Kenneth had shown. Carol's wounded arm hung in a proper sling, now courtesy of a clinic they'd stopped at just outside Seattle, where a sympathetic nurse practitioner had asked no questions and accepted cash. The office itself looked like a detective's, from a noir film filing cabinets, lining walls, coffee pot, perpetually brewing something that smelled burnt windows, overlooking Pike Place Market's early morning chaos. Gary Stone stood when they entered, 68 years old, and built like someone who'd spent a career chasing criminals through paperwork instead of streets. His handshake was firm, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Kenneth would have been proud. You made it farther than most people would have believed possible. Rebecca set the backpack on his desk with a thud that spoke to its density. 5 safe houses, 3 burned or ransacked, but we got what matters. Gary unzipped the bag, began pulling out folders with the reverence of someone handling religious texts. His hands trembled slightly, age or emotion or both. My God, he documented everything, every transaction, every kickback, every death that resulted from rationed medication. Is it enough? Rebecca's voice came out raw. Enough to prosecute. Enough to make his murder mean something. It's enough to destroy them. Gary spread documents across his desk, creating a mosaic of corruption. Washington Post publishes in, he checked his watch, 2 hours. Your mother's video already has 12 million views. FBI's Corruption Task Force raided Pierce's headquarters at dawn. Richard Thornton's in federal custody, pending arraignment. The words should have brought relief. Instead, Rebecca felt the weight of everything she'd lost, settling heavier. Thomas dead, Kenneth dead, Patricia dying by degrees from ricin that had already done irreversible damage. Carol shot protecting strangers. Emily traumatized in ways that would take years to unpack. Victory tasted like ash. Emily stirred her blood sugar monitor, beeping. Rebecca checked it automatically, 163 milligrams per deciliter. High but not dangerous. The pump adjusted, delivering correction, insulin. Such a simple thing, this tiny machine calculating dosages, keeping her daughter alive. And pharmaceutical executives had turned it into a profit center, had deliberately inflated prices because diabetics had no choice but to pay. Gary noticed her expression. You're thinking about the cost. I'm thinking about the 8-year-olds who died because their parents couldn't afford insulin, the veterans who rationed doses and went into ketoacidosis. Kenneth fought for them. We fought for them, but they're still dead. Justice doesn't resurrect the dead. Gary's voice carried the weight of 40 years investigating crimes where justice always came too late. But it prevents future deaths. These documents will force pharmaceutical reform, insulin price caps, transparency in VA contracting prosecution of executives who treat medicine as extortion. That's Kenneth's legacy. That's yours. Carol had been quiet, standing by the window, watching the street below. Now she turned, her good hand pressed against her wounded shoulder. There's FBI outside. 3 vehicles, probably here for Rebecca. Gary moved to the window, peered down. Detective Morrison kept her word. Gave you time to reach me before calling in federal jurisdiction. He looked at Rebecca. You have a choice. Go with them now. Enter protective custody. Testify when they're ready. Or run again, though I don't recommend it. Running just delays the inevitable. Rebecca thought about Emily sleeping in her arms despite the office's harsh fluorescent light. Thought about Patricia in a hospital bed, body ravaged by poison, but finally safe from Richard's reach. Thought about Kenneth's letter, his faith that she could finish what he started. I'm done running. The words came out steady, surprising herself with their certainty. We go with the FBI, but I have conditions. Gary raised an eyebrow. Federal agents don't usually negotiate with witnesses. They do when the witness holds evidence they desperately need and could upload to WikiLeaks if they're not treated well. Rebecca pulled out her phone, showed him the encrypted cloud account. Everything's backed up. If anything happens to me, to Emily, to Carol, it publishes automatically. A slow smile crossed Gary's weathered face. Kenneth taught you well. What are your conditions? Emily stays with me. No foster care, no separation. Patricia gets the best medical treatment available, paid for by seized assets from Richard and Pierce's operations. Carol receives full compensation for her injuries and lost income, plus witness protection if she wants it. And I want immunity for any laws we broke getting here. That's ambitious. That's non-negotiable. Gary picked up his phone, dialed a number from memory. Agent Morrison, Gary Stone. I have Rebecca Lawson in my office with the complete evidence archive Kenneth collected. She's willing to surrender to federal custody under specific conditions. The negotiation took 20 minutes. Morrison drove a hard bargain, but ultimately agreed Emily would stay with Rebecca under FBI protection. Patricia would receive medical care, Carol would be compensated, and the U.S. Attorney would grant Rebecca immunity in exchange for testimony. Rebecca descended to the street, carrying Emily Carroll beside her. Gary following with the backpack of evidence. FBI agents materialized from black SUVs, professional and efficient. Agent Morrison stepped forward, late 30s, auburn hair pulled back severely, eyes that had seen enough corruption to believe every word of Patricia's video. Ms. Lawson, I'm glad you're safe. Morrison's gaze shifted to Emily. And this must be Emily. We've arranged a hotel suite with the medical supplies, including insulin. A pediatric endocrinologist will check on her this afternoon. Thank you. Rebecca's throat tightened at the simple kindness, at someone finally caring whether an 8-year-old diabetic had proper medical support. Morrison gestured to the SUVs. We have a lot to discuss, but first you need rest. When's the last time you slept? Rebecca couldn't remember. Time had become a blur of burning buildings and blood sugar checks and desperate drives through darkness. the FBI safe house occupied a nondescript apartment building in Bellevue, all beige carpets and generic furniture designed to be forgotten, but it had a refrigerator stocked with insulin, a cabinet full of glucose tablets and juice boxes, and beds with clean sheets that smelled like detergent instead of fear. Emily fell asleep within minutes, her small body finally surrendering to exhaustion. Rebecca sat beside her, watching her daughter's chest rise and fall with the steady rhythm of someone who believed her mother would keep her safe. The trust was terrifying. Carol had her own room down the hall, FBI medical personnel attending her shoulder wound with the efficiency of people who'd patched up bullet holes before. Patricia was in Portland, still under guard at OHSU Hospital, where doctors worked to reverse ricin damage that might already be irreversible. Rebecca's phone buzzed, a text from Patricia. "They say I'll live. Liver damage, kidney function compromised, but I'll live. So proud of you, baby. Finish what Kenneth started." The Washington Post published at 9 a.m. Pacific. Rebecca read it on her phone while Emily slept, the headline, stark and damning. Pentagon pharmaceutical fraud, billions stolen, veterans dead, whistleblower murdered. The article laid it all out with the precision of journalists who'd verified every fact. Kenneth's investigation, the shell companies, the price fixing, Richard's role as enforcer, Pierce's orchestration of the entire operation. Quotes from VA doctors admitting they'd received kickbacks. Emails showing deliberate monopolization of insulin supply. Financial records tracing money from appropriated defense budgets to offshore accounts in the Caymans. And photographs. Kenneth at his retirement party, smiling and alive. Thomas's accident scene the brake lines investigators had somehow missed examining. Patricia's bruised face from the video. Rebecca and Emily's school photos captioned, "Whistleblower's family targeted by hired killer." The story went viral within an hour. Every major news outlet picked it up. Every cable network ran segments. Every senator with VA oversight responsibility scrambled to issue statements condemning the fraud they'd somehow failed to notice for years. Rebecca's phone exploded with interview requests. CNN, NBC, 60 Minutes, NPR. Publishers wanting book deals. Hollywood producers pitching movies. Everyone wanted a piece of the story, wanted to profit from the same tragedy they claimed to abhor. She ignored them all. This wasn't about fame. It was about justice. Agent Morrison returned that afternoon with the U.S. Attorney for Western Washington, a sharp woman named Julia Chen, who'd built a career prosecuting white-collar crime. They sat in the safe house's living room while Emily colored in a Disney coloring book, oblivious to the legal machinery grinding to life around her. Chen got straight to business. "We're filing charges under the False Claims Act conspiracy to defraud the United States, wire fraud, bribery of public officials, and first-degree murder for Kenneth Lawson and Thomas Lawson. Richard Thornton faces life without parole if convicted on all counts. Dr. Pierce is looking at minimum 25 years. What about Brandon Cole?" Rebecca's hands clenched, remembering the gun pointed at Emily's head. "Arrested in Montana 2 hours ago. Local sheriff recognized him from the BOLO. He's being extradited to Oregon to face attempted murder charges." Chen pulled out a legal pad covered in notes. "Your testimony will be crucial. The documents are solid, but juries respond to human stories. You put a face on the victims." "When's the trial?" 6 months minimum. These cases take time to build, but we're fast-tracking given the public attention. Chen studied Rebecca carefully. How's your daughter handling this? 8 years old is young to process attempted murder. Rebecca glanced at Emily, humming while she colored Elsa's dress blue. She's resilient, but she'll need therapy. We both will. We'll arrange it. FBI Victim Services can recommend trauma specialists who work with children. Morrison leaned forward. There's something else. Kenneth's files included evidence against several current Pentagon officials, 3 sitting senators, and an FBI assistant director. This goes higher than we initially realized. The implications crystallized. No wonder Kenneth's original investigation had been shut down. The corruption wasn't an isolated fraud. It was systemic, protected at the highest levels, maintained because too many powerful people profited from it. How many people are we talking about? Rebecca's voice came out hollow. Chen consulted her notes. 73 individuals across Department of Defense pharmaceutical companies and congressional staffers. Maybe more as we dig deeper. This is the biggest public corruption case since Watergate. And you're sure you can protect us, Emily, and me, and my mother? Because if 73 powerful people faced prison, they'd be desperate to eliminate witnesses. Morrison's expression went hard. You have my word. I failed Kenneth when he tried to blow the whistle. I won't fail you. The months that followed blurred together depositions and grand jury testimony, FBI briefings, and prosecutor meetings, media storms that Rebecca navigated by refusing all interviews until the trial concluded. Emily started therapy with a gentle woman named Dr. Angela Reeves, who specialized in childhood trauma and diabetes management, understanding how the two intersected in ways most therapists missed. Patricia was released from the hospital after 6 weeks, her body permanently damaged but stable. She moved into a small apartment in Boise that the FBI helped secure far enough from the Portland to feel safe, close enough to visit Rebecca and Emily in their temporary housing. The first time they met after everything, Patricia looked 10 years older, gaunt, gray-haired, moving with the careful fragility of someone whose body had betrayed her. But her eyes held something Rebecca hadn't seen in years' clarity. Strength, the Patricia she remembered from childhood before a string of bad men had taught her to make herself smaller. I'm sorry. Patricia's first words, sitting across from Rebecca in the safe house living room while Emily napped. For every choice I made that put you in danger, for choosing Richard over you, for not believing Kenneth about the corruption, for— Stop! Rebecca cut her off gently. You recorded that video knowing it might kill you. You gave us the opening we needed. That's what matters. I was a coward for so long. You were scared. There's a difference. Rebecca took her mother's trembling hands. You fought back when it counted. That takes more courage than never being afraid at all. Patricia cried, then silent tears tracking down her hollow cheeks. I watched that man poison me for 3 months and did nothing. What kind of mother? The kind who survived, the kind who's here now, safe, alive, ready to testify against the bastard who tried to kill you. Rebecca's voice went fierce. You're not a victim anymore, Mom. You're a survivor. Start acting like it. The words landed like a slap. Patricia blinked, processed, and something shifted in her expression. The last remnants of victimhood burning away, replaced by steel Rebecca recognized from Kenneth's genes. You're right. Patricia straightened her spine, finding strength that had been absent for years. I'm done apologizing. Richard Thornton tried to murder me. Dr. Pierce orchestrated fraud that killed hundreds, and I'm going to watch them both rot in prison. Carol visited monthly, her shoulder healed but scarred her truck-driving career on hiatus, while she wrote a memoir about the experience. Publishers were circling, attracted by the story of a working-class woman who'd risked everything to protect a stranger's child. She brought gifts for Emily Truck Driver, hats, Model 18-wheelers books about women who'd changed the world. "How's civilian life treating you?" Carol asked during one visit, watching Emily play with a toy semi-truck on the living room floor. Rebecca thought about the answer. The FBI protection felt like a gilded cage safe, but constrained every movement, monitored every outing, requiring security clearance. Emily couldn't attend normal school, couldn't have friends over, couldn't live like a child should. "It's necessary, but I'll be glad when the trial's over and we can disappear into regular anonymity." "You think that's possible?" Carol's expression was skeptical. "Your mother's video has 50 million views. You're famous whether you want to be or not." "Famous for what? Running from killers, watching buildings burn." Rebecca's frustration bled through. "I didn't ask for this. I just wanted to keep my daughter alive." "You did that, and you exposed corruption that would have killed thousands more." Carol's hand found Rebecca's shoulder, squeezed with the strength of someone who'd driven 1,000,000 miles and learned when to be gentle. "Give yourself credit. Kenneth chose you because he knew you'd finish it, and you did." The trial began on a June morning when Seattle's notorious rain finally broke into unexpected sunshine. Federal courthouse downtown security tighter than airport screening. Rebecca walked through metal detectors carrying nothing but her testimony and the weight of everyone counting on her not to break under cross-examination. The courtroom was packed, media victims' families, VA administrators who'd mysteriously discovered their consciences. Once arrests started curiosity seekers, treating it like entertainment. Rebecca spotted Patricia in the gallery looking fragile but determined. Carol beside her, solid and protective. Gary Stone in the back row, nodding encouragement. Emily was in FBI-supervised childcare 3 floors down with a social worker and her coloring books. They'd agreed she shouldn't see the trial, shouldn't hear details of how close she'd come to dying. Richard Thornton sat at the defense table, looking diminished, expensive suit that now hung too loose hair going gray at the temples, hands trembling slightly against his legal pad. He didn't look like someone who'd murdered 2 people and attempted 3 more. He looked like a middle manager caught embezzling office supplies. Dr. Donald Pierce occupied the other defense table, separate counsel, separate strategy. He'd maintained his arrogance, 60 years old, and acting like this was all a misunderstanding that competent lawyers would clear up. His legal team was impressive, expensive, and utterly outmatched by the evidence. The prosecution called witness after witness, building the case with methodical precision. VA administrators testified about pressure to approve certain pharmaceutical contracts. Doctors admitted accepting kickbacks disguised as consulting fees. Forensic accountants traced money flows through shell companies to offshore accounts controlled by Pierce and Richard. Then Patricia took the stand. She wore a simple navy dress, minimal makeup failing to hide the toll ricin had taken, sunken cheeks, thinning hair, hands that shook when she raised them to swear the oath, but her voice was steady. The prosecutor, Julia Chen, approached with visible respect. "Ms. Lawson, please tell the jury about your relationship with the defendant, Richard Thornton." Patricia's gaze found Richard across the courtroom, held it without flinching. I loved him, or I thought I did. He was charming, attentive, interested in my father Kenneth's work. I introduced them thinking they'd get along. Her voice hardened. I didn't realize I was bringing a murderer into my family. Richard's lawyer objected, inflammatory, Your Honor, but the judge overruled. Patricia continued. Richard asked detailed questions about Kenneth's career, about investigations he'd worked, about files he kept at home. I thought it was normal curiosity. It was reconnaissance. When did you realize Richard's true intentions? Too late. My daughter Rebecca tried to warn me. Kenneth tried to warn me, but I was lonely after my husband died, and Richard made me feel seen. Patricia's hands clenched in her lap. Then I started getting sick. Weight loss, nausea, hair falling out. Richard insisted it was stress, brought me vitamins and special tea. I trusted him. Chen produced evidence bags containing pill bottles and tea tins already admitted into evidence. Did you later discover what these contained? Ricin, a slow-acting poison that mimics natural illness. Richard was killing me over months, making it look like I was dying from age or disease. Patricia's composure cracked, tears spilling. I only survived because my daughter figured it out, because she loved me enough to save me even after I'd failed to protect her. The courtroom was silent, except for muffled crying from the gallery. Chen let the moment breathe before continuing. Did Richard Thornton ever discuss Kenneth Lawson's death with you? Objection. Richard's attorney shot up. Hearsay. It's a statement against interest by the defendant, Your Honor. Exception applies. The judge nodded. Overruled. The witness may answer. Patricia's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, forcing the jury to lean forward. 3 weeks before Kenneth died, Richard came home drunk. He said, That old bastard won't live forever. His secrets will be mine soon enough. I thought he meant after natural death. I didn't realize. She looked at Richard, and her expression held something worse than hate-pity. I didn't realize I'd let a monster into my bed. Richard's face had gone pale, his lawyer whispering urgently. Patricia wasn't done. Richard didn't just destroy my family. He destroyed hundreds of families. Veterans who couldn't afford their insulin because he inflated prices. Parents who watched their diabetic children die because they had to ration medication. He turned human suffering into profit, and he did it without a shred of remorse. Chen returned to her table. No further questions. The cross-examination was brutal. Richard's attorney, trying to paint Patricia as a vindictive ex-lover, as mentally unstable from Riken exposure, as coached by prosecutors desperate for a conviction. But Patricia held firm, answering each attack with quiet dignity that made the attorney look increasingly desperate. When she finally stepped down, Patricia walked past Richard's table close enough to touch. She didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge his existence, just walked past like he was already erased from her life. Rebecca was called next. She'd practiced her testimony with Chen for weeks, knew every question, every answer. But actually, sitting in the witness box with Richard 10 feet away brought everything back. The fear, the desperation, the night she'd stood in her mother's kitchen, watching Emily's blood sugar climb while Richard held their lives hostage over a locket. Chen started gently. Ms. Lawson, please tell the jury about the night of December 12th when you were forced to leave your mother's home. Rebecca walked them through it, Emily's insulin pump running dry, Richard destroying their medication out of spite, the ultimatum, the violence, the deadbolt clicking shut on a daughter and granddaughter left to die in a winter storm. What did you do then? I followed my grandfather's instructions. Kenneth left me a map to safe houses he'd built, locations where he'd hidden evidence of the pharmaceutical fraud. He knew Richard would come after me. He prepared for it years in advance. Did you believe you and your daughter were in danger? I knew we were. Rebecca's eyes found Richard, held his gaze. Richard sent a hired killer named Brandon Cole after us. Cole shot my friend Carol protecting us. He tied us up in a burning building and left us to die. All because Richard wanted to protect the billions he and Dr. Pierce had stolen. Richard's attorney objected, argued, but the evidence was overwhelming. Recorded phone calls between Richard and Brandon discussing payment for wet work, financial transfers, witness testimony from Carol about the shooting. Chen asked her final question, "Why did you risk everything, your safety, your daughter's life, to expose this fraud?" Rebecca's answer came without hesitation. Because my grandfather died fighting corruption that was killing people. Because my husband was murdered for asking questions about insulin prices. Because veterans were dying from rationed medication. Because my 8-year-old daughter has type 1 diabetes, and I'm tired of pharmaceutical executives treating her disease like a profit center. Her voice rose, passion bleeding through the rehearsed testimony. Because someone had to finish what Kenneth started. Someone had to care more about justice than about staying safe. The courtroom erupted in applause, unprofessional, unusual, but the judge let it continue for 5 seconds before gaveling for order. Richard's cross-examination tried to break her, accused her of manufacturing evidence of being a disgruntled former employee with grudges, of using her daughter's illness for sympathy. Rebecca answered every attack calmly, the weeks of preparation paying off. But then Richard's attorney made a mistake. "Isn't it true, Ms. Lawson, that you stand to profit significantly from this case? Book deals, movie, rights, interviews, you're capitalizing on tragedy." Rebecca's eyes went cold. "I donated every dollar of media proceeds to the Veterans Diabetes Fund. Every single dollar. Because, unlike your client, I don't profit from human suffering. I try to prevent it." The attorney had no response. Rebecca was excused. Dr. Pierce's trial was separate, but concurrent, his defense trying to paint him as an unwitting dupe of Richard's schemes. The prosecution demolished that narrative with emails showing Pierce had personally approved price increases, had specifically targeted diabetic veterans as captive market share, had ordered Kenneth's investigation shut down through his Pentagon connections. Pierce never showed remorse. Even when convicted on 47 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering, he maintained the entitled arrogance of someone who'd never faced consequences for anything. His sentencing was efficient: 25 years federal prison, $400 million in restitution, permanent ban from pharmaceutical industry. Richard's verdict came on a sweltering August afternoon. The jury had deliberated 6 hours, long enough to consider the evidence carefully, short enough to signal certainty. Guilty, every count. 2 counts first-degree murder for Kenneth and Thomas, attempted murder for Patricia, conspiracy to commit murder for the contracts on Rebecca and Emily, fraud, racketeering, obstruction of justice. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s who'd presided over 30 years of white-collar cases, didn't mince words at sentencing. "Mr. Thornton, You betrayed every principle of human decency. You murdered for profit, poisoned an innocent woman, endangered a child. You weaponized medicine against the most vulnerable among us veterans who'd served their country, diabetics, whose only crime was being sick. I sentence you to life without parole for each murder count consecutive, plus 40 additional years on fraud charges. You will die in federal prison. May you spend that time contemplating the lives you destroyed. The gavel cracked. Richard was led away in chains, his arrogance finally broken, his face gray with the realization that his life was over at 42. Patricia watched from the gallery, her expression unreadable. Rebecca sat beside her, hand in her mother's hand, feeling something loosen in her chest that had been clenched tight since Kenneth's death. It wasn't peace. The dead were still dead, the trauma still real, the scars still visible. But it was justice, and for now, that had to be enough. The year that followed passed in slow healing. Rebecca and Emily moved to Boise once the trial concluded, FBI protection lifting, but vigilance remaining. Small house, big yard, mountain views that reminded Rebecca of childhood camping trips with Kenneth. Emily started 4th grade at a public school where nobody knew her story, where she was just another kid with a medical device instead of a celebrity survivor. The diabetes management continued, blood sugar checks 6 times daily, pump refills, endocrinologist visits quarterly. But the insulin cost $35 a month now instead of $400. Reform legislation passed in the wake of the scandal. Kenneth's legacy written in policy changes and protected lives. Patricia moved into a cottage 3 blocks away, her health stabilized but permanently compromised. She volunteered at a domestic violence shelter, her own experience making her uniquely qualified to spot the warning signs of abuse other advocates missed. Carol visited monthly, her memoir published, to modest success. Her shoulder healed enough to return to long-haul trucking, but choosing not to. She'd discovered she preferred writing to driving, preferred telling stories to living them. Rebecca found work as a victim advocate for whistleblowers, helping people who'd discovered corruption navigate the impossible choice between silence and exposure. The Government Accountability Project hired her specifically for her experience, for her proof that the system could be forced to work if you pushed hard enough. She thought about Kenneth constantly in quiet moments, when Emily did homework at the kitchen table, when she helped other whistleblowers map their evidence, when news broke about another pharmaceutical executive facing charges stemming from the initial investigation. A documentary aired on PBS, The Lawson Files: One Family's Fight Against Pentagon Corruption. Rebecca had declined to participate, uncomfortable with fame, but they'd interviewed Patricia and Carol and Gary Stone, shown Kenneth's retirement photo, his OIG credentials, his methodical documentation. The film won awards. Rebecca never watched it. Emily's 4th grade class did a project on heroes. Most kids chose athletes or movie stars. Emily chose Kenneth, creating a poster board with photos from his federal investigator days, quotes from his letters, statistics about the lives saved by pharmaceutical reform. Her presentation was simple, direct, devastating in its honesty. My hero is my great-grandpa Kenneth. He found out bad people were stealing medicine money from sick soldiers. The bad people poisoned him so he couldn't tell anyone. But he left clues for my mama, and she finished his work. Now, insulin doesn't cost so much. Now veterans can afford their medicine. Great-grandpa Kenneth died, but he saved a lot of people by planning ahead. The teacher called Rebecca that night, voice thick with emotion. I've been teaching 20 years. That's the most powerful presentation I've ever heard. Emily didn't understand what she'd done that was special. To her, Kenneth was just great-grandpa who'd been smart and brave and loved her enough to plan for her future, even though they'd never met. Rebecca tried to explain. You honored his memory, baby. You made sure people remember why he fought. Do you think he knows? Emily's face, serious, worried. That we finished what he started. Rebecca thought about Kenneth's final letter, his faith that she'd be strong enough. Yeah, I think he knows. A package arrived one afternoon, forwarded through multiple addresses for security. Inside, a letter from Richard, handwritten on prison stationery. Rebecca almost burned it unread. Patricia, visiting for coffee, urged her to at least look. The letter was brief, Richard's handwriting shaky from whatever prison had done to him in 12 months of incarceration. Rebecca, I'm not writing to apologize. I'm not sorry. Your grandfather interfered with a lucrative operation. You weaponized his paranoia. You destroyed careers, destabilized pharmaceutical markets, cost thousands their jobs. But I underestimated you, saw a desperate single mother, and assumed you'd be controllable. I was wrong. Kenneth was right about one thing. You are an architect. You built a case from fragments, constructed proof from suspicions, and demolished everything I'd spent years creating. In another life, we might have worked together. You have skills that would have been valuable. Instead, I'll die here, and you'll live free on money stolen from a system you claim to oppose. We're not so different, you and I. Rebecca read it twice, feeling nothing. No anger, no vindication, just empty acknowledgement that Richard still didn't understand the difference between exposing corruption and participating in it. She burned the letter in the fireplace while Emily did homework, watching Richard's words blacken and curl ash floating up the chimney like his relevance dissolving into nothing. Patricia had been watching. What did he say? That we're the same. That I'm a hypocrite for accepting Kenneth's trust fund after exposing fraud. Are you? Patricia's question held no judgment, just genuine curiosity. Rebecca considered. Kenneth's money came from his federal pension and careful investments, not stolen funds. The trust fund was legitimate, established years before he discovered the fraud. But Richard's letter had been designed to plant doubt, to poison her peace with insinuation. No, Kenneth earned that money honestly. He gave it to me to protect Emily's future. That's not corruption, that's love. Rebecca met her mother's eyes. And even if it was questionable, I'd take it, because Emily's education matters more than my pride. Kenneth would agree. Patricia smiled, the expression transforming her ravaged face into something almost beautiful. He always said, take care of yours first, then worry about saving the world. The second anniversary of Kenneth's death passed quietly. Rebecca and Emily visited his grave in Portland, a proper headstone now paid for with trust fund money. Reading Kenneth Lawson, Federal Investigator, Patriot Hero. Flowers crowded the base from strangers who'd read about him, from veterans whose sins had been saved by pharmaceutical reform, from families who'd lost diabetic children and wanted someone to blame and someone to thank. Emily placed her own flowers, daisies, Kenneth's favorite. Hi, Great-Grandpa. We're doing good. Mama helps people now, like you did. I'm learning Python coding in school, and my diabetes is under control because the medicine doesn't cost so much anymore. Rebecca added her own silent message. Thank you for believing in me, for giving me the tools to protect Emily, for loving us enough to plan for a future you wouldn't live to see. A text arrived from Gary Stone. Thought you'd want to know Brandon Cole convicted. 15 years eligible for parole in 10. Not enough but something. Rebecca texted back, "It's more than most hired killers face. I'll take it." Another text, this one from Carol. "Publisher wants to know if you'd write the foreword for my memoir. No pressure, but it'd mean a lot." Rebecca considered. She'd avoided publicity for 2 years, declined every interview, every request to profit from the story. But Carol had bled for them, had sacrificed her career, had earned the right to tell her version. "Send me the manuscript. I'll write something." Life continued its slow march toward normal. Emily's blood sugar numbers stabilized, her A1C dropping to levels that made her endocrinologist beam with professional satisfaction. She made friends at school, joined the robotics club, started talking about maybe being an engineer when she grew up. "Like great-grandpa?" Rebecca asked. "He was an architect of cases, builder of evidence." "Like you," Emily corrected. "You build safety for people who tell the truth." The description struck Rebecca as both accurate and overwhelming. She'd helped 23 whistleblowers in 2 years, accountants who'd found embezzlement engineers, who'd discovered safety violations, nurses who'd reported patient abuse. Each case different, each person terrified, each requiring the same methodical documentation Kenneth had taught her. Some succeeded, some failed, some ended up dead, despite Rebecca's best efforts, because not every conspiracy could be exposed, not every killer could be stopped. But she tried, and trying mattered. A documentary crew approached about a 10th anniversary project, wanting to check in on where everyone ended up. Rebecca declined for herself, but encouraged Patricia to participate, to show that survival was possible, that victims could become advocates. Patricia agreed. The interview aired, showing her at the domestic violence shelter, talking to women in their 20s who reminded her of herself at that age, bright and broken, hoping the next man would be different. "I spent years choosing men who hurt me because I didn't believe I deserved better. Richard was just the most dangerous in a long line of mistakes. But my daughter taught me something: courage isn't never being afraid. It's doing what's right, even when you're terrified." The documentary also showed Carol back in her truck, driving cross-country, but now with a purpose beyond deliveries, speaking at truck stops about human trafficking, about being alert for signs of exploitation, using her platform to advocate for other invisible women. And Gary Stone, retired fully now, but still consulting on corruption cases, still mentoring young investigators who wanted to believe the system could work. Kenneth's network continuing his work, spreading like ripples from a stone thrown into still water. Rebecca watched the documentary alone after Emily went to bed, seeing her family's tragedy transformed into public inspiration, feeling complicated about the commodification of their pain. But if it helped someone, if one person saw Patricia's journey and left an abusive relationship, if one whistleblower saw Rebecca's success and found courage to speak up, if one investigator saw Gary's dedication and chose integrity over careerism, then maybe the publicity served a purpose. Maybe their trauma could be transmuted into something useful. Emily found her in the living room afterward, supposed to be asleep, but rarely following that rule. "Mama, can I ask you something?" "Always, baby. Do you miss the way things were before all this happened?" Rebecca thought about her answer carefully. Before meant Thomas alive, Kenneth alive, normalcy. But it also meant working a paralegal job. She hated struggling to afford Emily's insulin, living with Patricia and Richard in that house where violence lurked beneath expensive furniture. I miss the people we lost, but I don't miss who I was. I was smaller then, scared. You and I both were. Rebecca pulled Emily onto her lap, despite the girl being almost too big for it. Kenneth gave us a gift, not just money or evidence, but proof that we could be braver than we believed. That's worth more than easy safety. Emily processed this, her face scrunched in concentration. So, it's okay to be scared and brave at the same time. That's the only way bravery works. If you're not scared, it's just recklessness. Then you're the bravest person I know. Rebecca's eyes burned. No, baby. You are. You survived everything that happened, and you're still kind, still hopeful, still believing people are basically good. That takes more courage than anything I did. They sat together while the documentary credits rolled, while outside the Boise night settled into mountain silence, while somewhere in federal prison Richard Thornton rotted, and Dr. Pierce schemed, and Brandon Cole counted days until parole. And somewhere in a grave in Portland, Kenneth Lawson rested with the knowledge that he'd built something that lasted not just a case, but a legacy, not just evidence, but family steel strong enough to withstand corruption and murder and betrayal. Rebecca closed her eyes and let herself feel it. Finally, not peace exactly, but resolution. The story didn't end with Kenneth's death, or Richard's conviction, or even with this moment. It continued in every whistleblower she helped, every policy reform his evidence inspired, every life saved by affordable insulin, every diabetic child who wouldn't die because pharmaceutical executives could no longer treat medicine as extortion. That was the truth Kenneth had believed worth dying for, and Rebecca had proven worth living for. She opened her laptop, pulled up a draft email from an attorney in Chicago, another whistleblower, another corruption case, another person needing someone who understood the cost of speaking truth to power. Emily watched her type. New case, new case. Are you scared? Rebecca smiled, terrified, but I'm doing it anyway. Because that's what brave people do. Because that's what Kenneth taught us. She hit send, the email disappearing into the digital void with coordinates and evidence and desperate hope attached. Somewhere a conspiracy would unravel. Somewhere justice would be served or denied. Somewhere another person would discover that one voice, backed by evidence and courage, and Kenneth's blueprint for building cases that lasted, could move mountains. The answer was always in the architecture plan: carefully document thoroughly, build something strong enough to survive the builder. Kenneth had done it. Rebecca was doing it. And someday Emily would too. That was the legacy. That was the truth. That was enough.